And good evening. I'm Jonathan Higgins.
And I'm Rich Carlson.
And we are the Scanner Guys. And we are live this evening from coast to coast and worldwide right here on the Scanner Guys YouTube channel. And we're also simulcasting on the Scanner Master Facebook page. So some exciting stuff tonight. We're actually simulcasting on 2 social media networks. And we are totally excited about tonight's topic, Rich. And, you know, we didn't have anything to do with choosing this topic, did we?
No, we let the watchers pick it, and they picked a great topic. And I'm glad they picked this. This would have been my favorite anyway.
Yeah, so let's reveal the topic this evening. Classic scanners.
Yes, sir.
So classic scanners is what our topic is tonight. So as always, the Scanner Guys are brought to you by Scanner Master. So we got a great show underway. A lot of check-ins so far, as we can see, from everywhere from Michigan to Massachusetts and everywhere between. This is going to be really exciting. You know, we've got everybody saying hello to us, so we're looking forward to that as well. So what do you think? Do you think the audience? You said they picked the best topic. What do you think? You think we should do this again, where they pick a topic again?
Oh, absolutely. We got a lot of response from it. We got a lot of votes, and basically, it's a great way to find out what you guys want to listen to or want to watch versus having us just spew out stuff. So you guys pick the topic, what you want us to talk about and what you want to talk about. And I think it's going to work out great. And I love the new platform.
Me too. We're testing out some new technology here. And I think we're definitely loving this. And this is going to enhance the show quality a lot. Yeah. And boy, oh my word. Do you see all the check-ins, Rich? Boston, Maine, New York, Arizona.
Oh, they're coming from all over the place. And we are seeing the check-ins from both platforms, which is ideal. Now we can, since we're doing over both, I don't have to go and copy and paste all the comments from that to this. It's just, it's going to make it a lot easier.
Yeah, and if you haven't already, make sure you check out the Scanner Guys website. It's right on the screen right now, thescannerguys.weebly.com. So definitely check out our website after the broadcast. That's where you're going to see our polls. We may put up a poll over the holiday weekend. We'll have to come up with a poll question, and then we can reveal the, how the poll went at our next show. So we'll definitely have to think of something this weekend.
Absolutely. If you got topic ideas, give us a comment and let us know.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we're really getting a lot of good ones from the audience. That's for sure.
Absolutely.
So let's take a look here. So classic scanners is our topic. Hey, Rich.
So for all of our Canadian friends, happy Canada Day. This is the national holiday for Canada. They used to be called Dominion Day, if I remember correctly, when they created the Dominion of Canada, which was the joining of Ontario, Quebec, New Brunswick, and Nova Scotia. And then Prince Edward Island came later, and then the Plains, Alberta and British Columbia, Saskatchewan, and all that came up later. And then the very last one was Newfoundland, which wasn't part of Canada until 1949.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So happy Canada Day to all of our friends that are north of us. We wanted to make sure that we recognized it since today is July the 1st.
That's right. It's July already. What happened to the first half of the year? It's all over.
I know. Can you believe it? We're in the 7th month already. Yeah. I mean, we've been broadcasting each and every week, so we've had a half a year worth of shows.
Yeah. I mean, that's just this year.
So we're excited about doing more shows and definitely covering more topics. And just wanted to make sure that we wish a happy 4th to all of our people right here in the United States that are watching. quick reminder, we're still doing inventory at Scanner Master. So everything will ship out, what is it, next Monday, Rich, or Tuesday?
Yeah, so we're taking advantage of this is actually the slowest week of the year for us, believe it or not. So that's why we're doing the inventory this week, because we're trying to reduce the effect on our customers. So this year is different. I'm still working the phones this year, so the phones are still working, but we're just not able to ship any product this week, and we will start shipping again on Tuesday. Our phones will be working today, and today is done, but we work the phones tomorrow on Monday. But I'm gonna be off on Friday, so no phone service on Friday.
No phone service on Friday.
Right.
So yeah, most people will be off anyway on the 4th of July, and I don't think we'll be thinking about scanners, but you never know. I mean, some of us think 24/7 scanners.
So are they having fireworks by you?
I don't know. I haven't been really following all that.
Yeah, they canceled the fireworks by us, at least in town. I'm not sure if they're going to do it in the neighborhood or not, but they are. I can hear the firecrackers at night, though. The kids next door, not next door, but the next subdivision over, are enjoying their 4th of July.
4th of July, a little bit early.
Yeah.
Oh wow! I mean, I haven't really watched any fireworks down here in the Carolinas since I moved down here. I mean, the last time was. God, when was the last time? I don't remember. It's been a while. Mm-hmm. But here's our topic of discussion tonight. It is classic scanners, which was picked by you, the audience. And we're really excited to cover this because we're going to have a lot of fun looking at some of these classic scanners, some of which Rich and I have owned in the past, and some of them are really unique and interesting. Mm-hmm. What we're going to do is we're going to go over the manufacturer history timeline. We're going to look at some of the earlier scanners, some of the first programmable scanners, and of course, trunking. The first trunking scanners, the first digital scanners, some of the remote heads that came out, and of course, the zip code era of programming. Yeah, we came a long way. Coming from a tuner where you're scrolling down down frequencies, almost like an AM/FM radio, to crystals. Mm-hmm. And then we went to programmable, and then we added in programming by computer. Yeah. And then the communication changed with trunking, and then digital.
It's been crazy. The amount of technology that's out there in a handheld scanner, like an SDS 100 or a 436 or TRX or something like that, is phenomenal compared to what the scanners had in the past. This thing has got more computing power than early computers did. So
and you look at the just alone, you look at the size of the scanner. You take a look at the 125 AT, or even a more advanced scanner like the 325 P2. You look at some of the early scanners, portable scanners, quite large.
Yeah, they were huge, or even the small ones. So, they had four. The typical handheld scanner back in the day for us old farts, 4 channels, usually just VHF, and it was remarkable if you had one that had VHF and UHF, or low band and high band. That was just cool. That was cool. And 4 channels, and some of them only had like one lockout button. You could lock out one channel. Yeah. And I remember when the Bearcat 4.6 came out, 6 channels. So if you don't know sign language, this is 6, not 6. This is 6. So it had 6 channels. Wow, 6 channels in a handheld scanner. That was just like mind blowing.
Yeah.
Then you got to go out and buy the crystals for it, and that becomes wallet blowing.
Yeah, especially if you're trying to program in various frequencies, and it's like, or your department gets a new frequency, then you go, okay, I got to go buy crystals. So
well, the nice thing about back then is it was unusual for police departments to get new frequencies and stuff then, because it was just as bad for them comparatively to add a new frequency to a radio, because first off, the radios themselves were thousands of dollars, and to add a new channel to a radio, if it was capable of adding an additional channel, you had to go out and buy 2 crystals, a receive and a transmit, and then probably retune the thing in the first place. It was crazy. And the crystals are not the little scanner crystals. These were big crystals, about the size of an iPod. What do they call it? Earbud thing. I mean, they were literally that big, and they had built-in ovens to keep the crystal warm. Yeah. So it was really crazy. But now things are a lot easier, and the kids today, like we always say, the kids today don't know how bad it was back then.
Yeah, they certainly don't. We actually have a slide. I thought of it midday about adding it. Like for some of us youngsters that haven't seen what a crystal looks like. I sent Rich a text. I said, "Could you get us a couple of photos of some crystals? Just so our youngsters, that portion of the audience, can see what the heck a crystal looks like."
Yeah, I mean, they was again. It's like dial phones,
rotary dial. Yes.
The kids today have no idea. I saw a video on YouTube once where they put a dial phone in front of somebody, and they're like, "I don't know how to use that."
or like when somebody refers, "Can you use a landline?"
Yeah.
Like, what is a land? That most people, younger, only know a phone from this.
Yeah, that's a phone, not those big things.
Yeah.
And if you slam down a phone, you've broken your $1,000 iPhone versus your telephone company provided brick.
Yeah. Oh yeah. You really, when you were, my grandmother was, she's Portuguese, and she would, so when she would get a wrong number, she would swear at him in Portuguese, and then she would, roll up that receiver right down, and that was the end of that.
You're not old enough to remember, but my grandmother had a party line. And it was, if you pick up the phone, you had to wait to see if anybody was using the party line before you could dial. And you could actually listen to other people. There were 6 houses on her party line. So, yeah, you got to be old and gray hair or no hair to remember that. But, yeah, that was
sure.
Yeah.
But, yeah, so we're going to take you down memory lane, through all the scanners. So hopefully you can sit back and enjoy the show. So the first thing we're going to take you through is the classic scanners manufacturing timeline. So this took me a little bit. This wasn't a preset slide. I actually had to build this. So it took a little bit to do this. So let's start it off, Rich. Take us to 1954.
All right. So in 1954, Regency, the same company who made scanners, came out with the first commercial transistor portable radio. It was a little plastic box, but yay big, had a dial on it and a volume control, and you could dial in any AM broadcast frequency. So the kids today don't remember AM radio either. It was 540 through, at the time, 1600. And you could listen to a baseball game. You could listen to music, although the speaker was relatively poor. But it was groundbreaking. There was no such thing as a little battery-powered portable radio. And it was, I think it was called the TS1 or the T1 or something like that. But you see them in antique stores once in a while. And I saw one in an antique store a couple of years ago. I wish I would have bought it. But that was groundbreaking. It was the TR1. Because it was a joint project between Regency and Texas Instrument. And Texas Instrument made the semiconductors, the 4 or 5 transistors that were built into the radio. And Regency assembled it and put it this case in the speaker. But it was groundbreaking. Nobody had something like that. And that was the first big commercial transistor radio product, and it was made right here in the USA.
Isn't that crazy? And then we went into, Regency seemed like they were kind of at the beginning here, in the 1950s.
Yeah, they were the leader in scanning products for many, many years, and it was a race between Regency and Radio Shack back, later on. But in the original days, Regency was king of scanners, and before scanners, they had things called monitor radios, and they were basically tunable radios that big desk sets. I mean, these things were huge. But it had a great big dial, and you can tune in from 30 to 50 or from 150 to 174. You can tune in the frequency, and it had a volume control. It had a squelch control and a tuning knob and a big old 1/4-inch headphone jack. And it plugged in the radio. It had vacuum tubes. That's another thing I wish I would have gotten pictures of. But vacuum tubes are about the size of my thumb, and they plugged in, and they had a heating element that created heat and energy that passed through a plate, and it was made it into a diode or a triode or an amplifier. It was just, vacuum tubes that's a whole nother subject. But that was how people listened to police calls back when they moved to VHF. There was no such thing as crystal scanners or scanners at all, and had all of one channel at a time.
Isn't that amazing?
Mm-hmm.
So it looks like in 1966, Uniden took shape. Uniden was started as a Japanese electronics company.
Yep. Yeah, they weren't into scanners yet, though.
Yeah, that's when they've started to get into electronics.
Yeah.
And then looks like they introduced in 1970. Looks like they introduced their first scanner.
Yeah, but it wasn't actually Uniden yet. Ltr was the name of the company. They were headquartered right down the street from Regency in Indiana. And in fact, I think there were some of the same people involved. I don't remember. I did some research on this before, but I don't remember the exact details at this point. But Regency and Ltr, who made the Bearcat scanners at the time, some of the personnel went from one to the other or back and forth, and they were both in Indianapolis. And Ltr made their scanners, and Regency had theirs. And it wasn't until the 80s, I think it was, or late 70s or mid 80s, that Uniden actually bought Ltr.
Wow.
And they had the original scanner was the BC scanners. The BCH was the high band. The BCU, I think, was what they called the UHF, and the BCL would have been the low band one.
Wow! So it was just individual radios for individual bands. There was nothing like we're spoiled with now with with everything. And then Regency, in 1972, introduced its first crystal scanners.
Mm-hmm.
So that's we were just talking about that just a moment ago. And then you've talked about this other scanner in 1975. Tell me a little bit about that one.
Okay, the Whammo 10. That was a great name for a scanner. But that one, you had a little metal comb, and you had a book that had a list of frequencies, and it would tell you, comb number, time number 1, 7, and 4, and you pop those off, and that was for frequency 42.5. And you'd pop those tines off that metal comb, and you'd stick it into a slot. You press a button, and it would program that frequency into the scanner. And you do that for the other frequencies. I think it had 8 channels or 10 channels or something like that. And so you'd have a whole thing of these combs, and you could buy more combs. They were relatively inexpensive, but you buy a pack of 10 for like 10 or 15 bucks, and that's how you would change the channels. And the neat thing about that is if you wanted to change the channels, if you had in a car or something like that, you wanted to change the channels when you're driving from Chicago to Milwaukee, you want to change the frequencies, you take the combs out of the glove box and pop them into the scanner for the Milwaukee frequencies.
Oh my word, that's funny. That was the early days of SD cards.
Yeah. Yeah. 1 byte of memory.
Oh man. Yeah. And then 1977, Uniden came out with a BC101, a switch programmable scanner was introduced.
That one was cool because instead of having a comb, I think there were 16 channels, and you would arrange all the lockout switches into a certain order, on, off, on, off, on, depending on what the frequency was, and then press a button, and it would program that frequency into the channel that you were programming. Wow. And I think it had 16 channels, and you had 16 buttons or 16 switches, and you'd look up in the book, okay, I want to put 155.25 in, and okay, 155.25 is on, off, on, off, on, off.
Wow. And then people say, programming's hard now. That seems to be a bit challenging because you would have to get the sequence correct in order to get it programmed. I mean, you're not looking at a alphanumeric display, to be able to see.
Yeah. And you really wouldn't know what that frequency was. You'd have to have it either write down on your list or know that channel 1 was police and channel 2 was fire. And all of this time, while we're only pretty much talking about Regency Unit in here, there are other companies doing other things. There was another company, which we're going to show a picture of later, that instead of using the metal combs, it had like a punch card. You would punch out the numbers and put that punch into a slot. And then there was Regency had another thing, and I don't remember if we have a picture of it on this one. I think we did on the last time we did the classic show. It had the scanner itself was great big thing, wooden case, about yay big, and it had a matching box that you could buy with it, and it would you would dial in the frequency 155.475 and press the button, and that would program the frequency into the scanner. It was one of the first dial-in frequency scanners available.
Wow. Boy, I mean, things were challenging for those people that lived during those times, to be able to program some of these radios. And then, we're talking about all the various switches and combination and dials. And then we get to 1979, which was the BC 210, the 2010. I'm not 2010.
210,
210, with a keyboard programmable. That must have made life easier.
When that came out, I was working as a dispatcher on the 3 to 11 shift, and my buddy Bob, who was my partner, we had 2 guys working the shift, and he had one of these, and I was drooling over that thing. I wanted that so bad. I just didn't have the money. Yeah, and it was expensive at that time. They were $300 or $400, 50 years ago or 40 years ago, actually. But that was that's like a couple $1,000s these days, or close to it. Imagine twice as much what you're paying for an SDS 200 these days. And when you're an 18-year-old kid working as a dispatcher on the night shift, you don't have that kind of money. And he got one, and I don't know how he did it, but he did. And
he must have saved his money.
Oh, he let me play with it. He left it in the dispatch center a couple times, and when he went on vacation, he let me use it for 2 whole weeks.
Oh,
and I'm like, oh, this is great. And so I eventually saved up money and got one. But oh man, that was so cool.
Yeah, you must have been in your glory there, being able to be able to use it.
Yeah, and just to dial in whatever frequency you wanted, and just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, boom, and it had 10 channels, and it had lockout and delay. But the funny thing about it is, when you turn the radio off, it had a battery to hold the channel memory, but it wouldn't retain the lockouts or delay.
Oh dear. Yeah. Hey, the lockout, that was early days of United's temporary lockout.
Yeah. There you go.
There you go. It was United's early days of temporary lockout. You think of that, you press on the newer radios now, you press the lockout button once, you power cycle the unit, and then it'll erase all those temporary lockouts. So see, United was already thinking ahead there.
yeah, they were ahead of their time on that. But yeah, that really was the cat's meow of scanners back then.
So another big thing happened in 1979. Scanner Master became a company, and Rich Barnett, the owner of the company, started publishing his first frequency books. And those were actually published and sold at a company called You Do It Electronics in Needham, Massachusetts.
Yep.
So you probably see that as you travel on 128 or Route 95. If you're from Massachusetts, you see You Do It Electronics. It's right off the highway. You can see that, and you can also see, Channel 5, the Boston ABC affiliate. Their facility is on the other side of the highway. And this section of 95/128 is coined as the Needham antennas. A lot of traffic reporters, because all the television stations have all their transmit sites right there. So at some point, I'm not too sure if we'll be able to get Rich on as a guest. He's a little shy getting him onto these things.
Yeah.
But it'd be interesting for him to tell the story firsthand, how Scanner Master became what it is today. And that's originally how he started the company, by selling the frequency books, which he started to publish. His dad, Sumner Barnett, which worked for Scanner Master for many years. This was he retired from his career and then started working again and did another lifetime worth of work for Scanner Master until he finally retired. And Sumner basically helped him launch Scanner Master, and Sumner's worked in major companies, Zayres and a few other major corporations that sold various products, like department stores and such. So he was very familiar with business and running a retail front. So, thanks to Sumner and Rich, we're here today, broadcasting.
Oh yeah, I get just as many calls for Sumner as I do for Rich on the phones. So, well, what was next up?
Yeah, let's continue on to the next slide here. The 1980s looks like that was a busy time.
Yeah, that was a great time for scanners. That was like the golden age of scanners.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about GRE America for those people that don't remember.
Well, GRE, the Japanese company, it was actually, I think it was a Japanese company with Chinese manufacturing. They created almost all of the Radio Shack scanners back in the day, and the most famous Radio Shack scanners were made by GRE. The 2004, 5, and 6, that whole Pro 2000 line, most of those were made by GRE for Radio Shack, and a lot of those scanners had other European models of the very similar European models. When I was in England, there was Tandy, and there was another company name for the scanners in England, which I can't recall right now. The exact same scanner appearance, capabilities and everything, but they were made by GRE. And Uniden also made later on, after Uniden bought the Bearcat line, Uniden made a bunch of the Radio Shack scanners as well, but most of them were made by GRE. And then back in the early 80s, Uniden bought the Bearcat scanner line and from Ltr, and I think they just either bought the company or bought the scanner line. And then it was the Uniden Bearcats. For a while there, you still had the Ltr labeling on some of the scanners, and Uniden on the front and an Ltr label on the back. And then eventually they moved all the manufacturing offshore and started creating their own Uniden branded Bearcat scanners versus the Ltr. Then 1981, that's when the BC100, and that was a handheld programmable scanner, and that was cool. I had one of those as well, and I went out and bought that as soon as it came out because it was awesome.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like now Uniden's starting to come into the fold now, where we're starting to see, the scanners started to come out. So this is when I got into the hobby, was in the late 80s. Mm-hmm. So, I've always, this is when I was growing up as a kid, and I got my first scanner from my dad as a gift. And actually, it's in the slideshow, so I'll definitely mention that when that slide comes up. But yeah,
Yeah.
and then Regency was still alive and well.
Oh yeah, they had their HX 1000 and then their 1500, and the 1500 was kind of the pinnacle of the Regency handheld scanners. It was like made out of brick. You couldn't destroy it. It worked great. The audio on it was spectacular. It was extremely sensitive and pretty darn selective for the time. And it was like the railfan's ultimate scanner of the time. Worked really well on railroad frequencies. I had one of those, and I took it with me everywhere I went, and it was cool. Plus, it also had a desktop charger that you could get for it, which we get people asking for all the time. And I don't know why the companies don't make those, but they were awesome. I mean, you just put it on the charger, it would charge up, and that was probably my favorite scanner up until the time. I liked it even much more than the BC100 and the 100 XLT.
Yeah, and that's certainly crazy. How we've taken shape. I know a lot of people, when the SDS 100 came out, they were hoping that would be a drop-in charger type of thing.
Yeah.
And I remember that was the slide-off battery on the 100, right, Rich?
On the on which one? The BC100?
Yeah.
No, that was the original BC100 had AA rechargeable batteries. I think there were 6 of them, 3 on each side, or maybe it was just 4, I forget which. But you actually, in order to take the batteries out, you had to use a little Phillips head screwdriver to pull the bottom panel out and then put the batteries in. I remember I took an Amtrak trip across the country with that, and I brought a bunch of AA batteries and a little screwdriver so I could change them on the way because I didn't have any way to charge the batteries.
Yeah, and you had to just keep swapping.
Yeah, and it wasn't until the 100 XLT came out, which was a totally different radio. And it was a much larger radio, had a totally different appearance and stuff. And that's the one that had the slide-off battery. And they had the 200 XLT, and the difference between those were, I think the 200 had 800 megahertz on it, and the 100 only had VHF and UHF. But those were awesome radios, those 100s. I had a couple of those.
Wow. And it looks like a big thing happened in 1988. Yep. Regency and Uniden. Looks like the Regency sold its scanner line to Uniden. So that was a big event in 1988. I mean, Regency, as we could see in the timeline, it was the leader at one point, and they were basically bought out by Uniden.
Yeah, their scanner line, by then Uniden really was kind of taking over between them and Radio Shack, they were really kind of taking over, and Regency's market share dropped quite a bit. And so they were obviously having some issues there. And so Uniden bought the Regency scanner line, and Regency renamed the company to Realm, which I think stood for Regency Electronics Land Mobile, because they also made two-way radios. And they sold their scanner line to Uniden, and eventually, pretty soon thereafter, Uniden took their 100 and 200 XLT scanners and relabeled them with Regency names and different numbers on them, but they're basically the same scanner. And the rest of the Regency line was just dropped. So basically, it was eliminating a competitor to gain market share. Radio Shack at the time was still very active in the scanner business. You had at that time you had the Pro 34 came out, and that was a big scanner for Radio Shack and scanners of that ilk.
I was taking a drink of water there, as you can probably hear on the mic. And then 1992, the BC1 pre-programmable scanner was introduced. I'm not familiar with the BC1.
I think was that the computer programmed one, if I recall correctly. They had there was a bunch of different computer programmable scanners that were out around that time frame, and I don't really remember on the BC1. That one's escaped me. I saw that in your timeline, and I don't remember if that was from a prior show, but
Yeah, that's the timeline was some of it was actually from a prior show that you put together the timeline, and then I literally put it into a timeline like this.
Yeah, but at the time there were a couple different computer-controlled scanners that came out in that time frame. There was the CompuScan, and that might have been what it was. It was the BC1 CompuScan, I think is what it was. And there were a couple of different. Radio Shack came out with a computer-controlled scanner. Uniden had one, and it was. They were very rudimentary. I mean, you had to have a PC running DOS, or there was a couple other operating systems at the time that they would work on. But I mean, you really had to have be a real computer geek in order to use those. Later on, ICOM came out with a line of computer black box scanners. They were like the original SDRs, but these are just basically scanners that were controlled by computer.
Yeah, totally. And I just got into the hobby, I think somewhere towards the tail end of the 1980s. Mm-hmm. In 1997, I had a couple of these radios, the BC 895 XLT, which was one of the first trunk tracking radios. And if anybody remembers that radio, it was a big honking radio. I mean, this was like a huge radio. You remember? Did you ever own one of those, Rich?
I never did. That was one of the few lines that I never had. I never had any of those big Unidens of that ilk. The 895. There was like the 9000.
Yep.
Yeah, I never had any of those. I don't know why, but I did have a 235, and that was the first handheld trunk tracker, and that was remarkable at the time.
Yeah, so the 895, I actually had a couple of those. Mm-hmm. So if I remember correctly, you could only do trunking or conventional at one time. You couldn't do both at the same time.
Yeah, you couldn't do both, yeah.
So I ended up doing, as I had them stacked, I had one 895 and another 895 on top of each other. So I had conventional, and then at this point, the Mass State Police were on a trunking system. Yep. So I was able to follow the communication on the trunk system with that. So I loved that radio. I actually had I think I had at one point, God, how many did I have? I think I had about 4.
I bet you had a big room. Those things were huge.
Those were huge. But the thing, it had a nice big screen. Yep. I mean, it had that big rotary knob. Yep. It had PL tone and DPL tone, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, but you had to buy the box, the little board for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, the 235 didn't have that PL tone, but you could do all 3 formats of it did both formats of trunking. Did Motorola Type 1 and Type 2. It wasn't until the 245 came out that you could do EDX trunking. Because I was a beta tester on the 245, and because we had an EDX system out by us at the time, and that was cool.
So here we are in memory lane, 1997, and then we go to 2000, and oh my God, the 780 XLT.
Every bit as groundbreaking as the 210 was 20 years before. The 780 XLT was a huge deal. Back then, 16 scanners were still considered premium. And if you had a 100-channel scanner, it was remarkable. But this had 500 channels. And it could do trunking and conventional at the same time. And it could do EDX and Motorola trunking. It was a groundbreaking scanner.
2 lines of alpha tag display.
Yeah.
The PL tones. Yeah, I mean, this radio, you could do it all. I had a couple of these 780s, and I remember how expensive they were. They were not cheap.
$500.
Yeah.
Yeah, you paid $1 per channel on those things.
Yeah.
and they were really expensive, and but they were awesome, and they were hugely desirable. It's every bit as desirable as the SDSs are now.
Hmm.
That was what the 780 was. And one of the cool things with the 780 was that it had every feature that you would pay extra for built into it.
Yeah, you weren't
Um,
doing all these add-ons with.
yeah, you didn't have to buy the PL board and all the rest of that stuff. Karma, the Chicago Scanner Club that I've been with for as long as Karma's been around, we had our first what we call Friday Nighter, which became really, really popular. And it was basically a workshop on the 780 because they had just come out and everybody wanted to see them. Remember what we were doing with the SDS 100 when it first came out?
Yeah.
That's what we did with the 780. We coupled the guys that had them. We got up there and we did a presentation on it. We took the cover off and let people see inside it. We showed them how it worked. We even had an overhead projector, an opaque projector, where we put the thing on there so people could see what the thing looked like on the screen, which is, nowadays we take it for granted, but that back then, again, it was great technology. But it was huge. We had, I don't know, 50, 75 people come for that, which was remarkable.
Yeah, I mean the thing about the 780, I mean, I had one of those in the vehicle. I just loved it. I mean, the other thing too, that was probably the first radio that I ended up using, programming it by computer. Like when I had, picture this, so I had a couple of scanners at my house and they were BC 895 XLTs. So I would every so often reset it and then reprogram the whole thing. And this was back in the day when I remembered frequencies. So I knew I could rattle off frequencies because every so often, probably every 6 months, I would just basically reset it, reprogram it, add, remove frequencies. I would kind of just do it all over again.
Sure.
And when the 780 came out, this is when I got into computer programming my scanner, and it had the old serial port on the rear, and then a lot of the older computers had the serial connection on there. And then when computers started to change and USB drives became familiar, I remember working at Scanner Master, a lot of people saying, "What do I do? What do I do? What do I do?" Now that and then I had a few customers that would keep an older computer with a serial connection, just be able to program it.
Oh yeah. Well, and then you had the 780 begat the 785, and then the handheld. There was no handheld version of the 780 at the time. They never came out with one. So Scanner Master had two products that would work. One of them was an internal battery.
Yes.
He took the cover off, and I had this, and it was a 12-volt gel cell that fit inside there, and a little circuit board that you put in there. And it was so cool because there was a little hole in the back of the 780 that had a threaded. It was a threaded hole that you could put a bracket in there, but there was a little green light on that board that came with the battery, and you put the battery in there, put the radio back together, and then you could charge the battery with the regular power cord. And it was such an awesome thing. And the other thing we had for it was a nylon carry case with a strap. It was like carrying a purse. But you had your 780, and you used two right angle connectors so that the antenna would come out. It was basically a way to make your 780 portable.
Yeah, so it was literally a backpack scanner, for the most part, we could call it.
Oh, yeah, and they were phenomenal. I had one of those, and I tell you, it was great, and the battery worked great. It would last, I don't know, 20, 30 hours sometimes. Yeah.
It's so crazy, I mean, that was another product. I forgot all about that product, that came out. And, of course, I mean, look at it, 3 years later. We've had, the big 780 came out. That was a huge hit. And yeah, you were right. There was no portable at that time that actually came out to, be the brother sister model of that radio. And then we had the BC 785 XLT and the BC 250D. The first digital scanners were introduced, but these required the card.
Yeah. So it was actually the BC 785D. And and the 785D and 250D had a slot on the back of the radio. Kind of looked like an oversized SD card slot, but it was actually there was a little screw on the back that held that plastic cover on there, and you take that plastic cover off, and you take this card, and it was, I don't know, the size bigger than an SD card. And we got a picture of it coming up eventually. And you'd stick that in there, and now you could actually hear P25 digital. And at that time, it only did the older model of scanning, of digital scanning, the 3600 baud control channel, if you know what that means. But the fact that you could do that in a handheld with the 250D was just, and that was the successor to the 785, and that was the only way you get the handheld.
Yeah, I mean, that is it's crazy times. So we're going to continue on with our timeline here. We're going to jump in further into the 2000s here. Mm-hmm. And at this point, I started working at Scanner Master when GRE came into the fold, and they actually had their own first scanner product line under its own name in the US with the PSR 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, and 600.
Yeah,
all those radios, and that was the main competitor. I remember selling at Scanner Master, and talking to the customers, and that was the big thing. It was, what's the difference between the GRE and the Uniden model? That was, I was, having that conversation, call after call after call, and then going over features. Okay, this radio's got this radio's got that. There was a price difference in between the two, and then you had to go through that, and there was a lot of conversation with it. And I remember, trying out, these radios and saying, wow, it's a totally different memory structure, So that's the other thing too, is if you had some in this camp on the GRE camp, and you had some on the Uniden camp, you couldn't take the knowledge that you knew from, you had to throw out what you knew from one radio to the other, because it was object orientated on the GRE, and then on the Uniden had its dynamic allocated memory system on that side. Mm-hmm. So you literally were like, like if you had somebody cross over into the other camp, they're like, whoa, what is this?
Yeah, you had to unlearn everything from Uniden to relearn everything from GRE, and that continues to the day. With the Whistler versus Uniden, once you know one, it's hard to figure out the other one. But if you had Radio Shack scanners, you understood the GRE because they all had Radio Shack equivalents. Now, I was at Dayton when GRE when they first announced their scanners. In fact, I saw them that Thursday night before they were officially introduced at Dayton. A friend of mine was one of their beta testers, and I was able to get a kind of a sneak peek at them, which was also, I got to see him before Rich did. And he was so mad because I got to see him and he didn't. So, but yeah, they were really, that was a big thing at the time, because they never sold scanners in the US under their own name at the time. They always were labeled as Radio Shacks.
Yeah. I mean, I think weren't we beta testing the SDS before Rich even knew about it?
We got roped into that independent of Scanner Master.
Yeah, there was,
and we couldn't even tell Rich about it.
Yeah, he didn't know anything about it. I mean, I'm sure he must have knew things, but he didn't know
we had them.
Yeah. And also, so we're jumping along here. So we're in 2007 and then 2010. This was one of the first radios that I was able to beta test. And this was the Uniden Home Patrol 1. It was the first zip code based programmable scanner. Now, the thing was, I guess we can share a little bit of the beta testing experience, can we?
Yeah, we were both beta testers for this one.
So. Okay, so the thing is you had a whole bunch of guys, which were the top tier of the beta testing group. We're the experts in the industry. This is something that you're asked to be a part of this group. You're not, you don't call up and say, hey, can I do this?
Right.
They select you.
Yeah, so they recruit you.
So me coming from sales at Scanner Master. I've been now at 2010, being at Scanner Master for a couple of years. I saw this radio and said, oh my God, this is the answer to some of our customers. And I said, yeah, this is great. This is going to help out a lot of our customers get a digital scanner. It's not so complicated. This is going to work. The other guys that were on the group were like, holy crap, this is too simple,
See, I wasn't selling scanners at the time. I was writing books. I wasn't selling scanners yet. And I was the wrong guy to beta test that scanner because I didn't have that daily customer contact.
When I saw this, I said, this is a smart move on Uniden. Not only, we're getting into the touchscreen display, we're also getting into a simpler programming with the Sentinel software and a zip code based programming. So I said, this is going to be good for the scanner industry. This is going to get some of the people that have kind of shied away from getting a scanner because it's gotten too complicated. This is going to make it simpler. So, eventually, all the guys, I think after a while, once Paul Obitz, when he was at the lead of the testing, explain, look, we're not gearing this towards you guys, but we need to make sure it works.
That was the problem. When I got the radio, he asked me if I wanted to be on the beta team. Yeah, sure, I'll try it. Because I'd done a few of them before. And I'll try this one. And he didn't say anything about it. And the thing came in the box. I'm looking at it and said, what the heck is this thing? And I think I used some 4-letter words. I was like, what the heck am I supposed to do with this thing? I can't even program a frequency on it. And like I say, I was the wrong guy to beta test it. And eventually, after about 2 weeks, I finally realized that, all right, this is what I'm supposed to do with this. I'm trying to, first off, let's make sure the radio part works, which actually it worked pretty well at the time for a beta product. And don't worry about the interface so much. And then I started realizing, okay, now it's making sense.
Yeah.
And then I actually started talking to a couple people who weren't into radios at the time, but they knew I was, so they wanted to know how radio stuff worked. And so I actually sat down with a couple of those guys in front of the radio and said, "Here, try this," and they were like, "Ooh, I like that,"
And I can tell you, when we started selling these, we sold, this is probably, I would have to check with Rich Barnett, but I think this was the radio that we sold the most of at Scanner Master. This was the largest top selling scanner for Scanner Master selling. We ordered them, and they just kept rolling out the door the second we got it. I mean, the Home Patrol, I love the Home Patrol. And I've learned to be able to use this radio as a expert in the industry by creating favorites lists. Literally, that's how I use my Home Patrol. And then I love the GPS technology and being able to use that full database when necessary. So 2010 was a huge year for Uniden. And look what happens 4 years later. GRE sells its product line to Whistler Group. Whistler Group buys the product line and introduces its own WS 1010, 1040, 1080, 1065, 1025, and 1095. So they rebranded a lot of the Whistler. Whistler rebranded a lot of the GRE scanners. They did the black cases versus the silver. The silver black type of thing that Whistler, that GRE was doing. So they actually, they rebranded all the radios. And then in 2016, they introduced the TRX 1 and 2. And then 2018, Rich and I are on this timeline because we were able to introduce the SDS 100 to the world at the Dayton Hamvention.
Yeah, I mean, up until then, it had basically been rumors and and stuff, and it got accidentally introduced, not by us, accidentally brought to the public's attention, and we were a part of the beta project, and there were a bunch of others, and a couple of people that are on our regular viewers were in that beta team as well, and it was kind of an open secret. And in the weeks leading up to Dayton, we approached Paul and said, "Hey, is it okay that we do this? And what are our limits on this?" He said, "You know what? After this date, anything you want, say it, because it's already, the cat was out of the bag by then.
Yeah.
It was universally known, and it wasn't the big secret anymore. So he basically took the handcuffs off and said, 'Go at it, guys.'" And we did.
We did. I mean, this is how the Scanner guys were kind of created. We were doing Facebook Live before it became a big deal.
Yeah.
You and I were doing it from the car. We were doing it at the hotel.
Yep.
I mean, we were live, almost as much as we could. And the Scanner guys,
4 times a day. Yeah.
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 I'm just laughing at the comments right now. I just saw David Fuller asking, "What is the bottle count right now, Rich?" And here is the reply. Rich was actually able to reply 2 bottles so far. So,
yeah. So that's always the ongoing count. Because I drink water like a fish when we're doing the show.
Yeah.
So there's bottle 1, here's bottle 2, and I got a couple more in the on deck circle. So
yeah, that's for sure. So, and I got my big water bottle here. Let's continue on. So,
you're a little more environmentally friendly than I am.
Yes, you're using all that plastic. So we had a couple of big years. 2018 was the SDS, and 2019 was the SDS 200.
Yep.
And then also in 2019, we launched officially the Scanner Guys show, which is a weekly live show right here on originally on Facebook, and then we switched over to YouTube. So really exciting. My water is cold. Somebody's asking, "Is your water cold?"
Yeah, it's cold. And but the other 2 bottles, by the time we're done, they'll be room temperature already.
I'm sure. All right, let's continue on. We spent a lot of time on the timeline.
No, by the way, it really is water. It's not vodka.
Yes, mine is water too. That would be real interesting if it was something else, because I don't drink, so that's going to be a crazy live show to see how it would react to that. So
we're going to have to run through these next few slides relatively quick, I think, because we're already out.
So Rig Picks, thanks to them, and our Radio Picks for letting us use these photos. So we'll take a look at that first. Regency, we spoke about this during the timeline, right, Rich?
Yep, this was one of their newer tunable receivers, tube tunable receivers. So there's vacuum tubes in there. This one actually had both VHF high band and low band. You can select the band you want, and then you just tune it. So you had no idea if it was 155.25 or 155.28. It was 155 point something. Is about as close as you could tell. But at that time, scanner signals were much wider, and it was it was easier to tune, because number one, there was a lot less traffic out there, and the signals were a lot wider, so they actually worked relatively well. So
yeah, that's a really cool radio, and that's the early days. I saw that in the scanner, the National Scanner Museum. They were very tunable like this. We'll continue on. So we've got more tunable receivers now, Rich. These are the realistic Radio Shack ones.
Yep, these were the Pro 2 and 3, one of the very early Radio Shack ones. These were from the 70s, late 60s, early 70s, and they were desktop radios. I don't even think they had the ability to do DC power on these. They only work at a wall, but these were transistorized, so you didn't have vacuum tubes. Again, you could tune in the frequency. Some of them had UHF, some of them had VHF. There were, I don't know, half a dozen different models like this. And eventually they had one, I don't have a picture of it here, but they had one where you could actually stick a crystal in it and select either the tuner or a crystal. And notice that great big 1/4-inch headphone jack.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The big headphone jack there.
Yep.
Oh, here we go. Here's the photos for boys and girls out there that are super young and you haven't seen what the crystals look like.
Yeah, these were about the size of your thumbnail, if you have small thumbs, and they had 2 little prongs on there, and you would open up either the case of the scanner or a little door on the top of the scanner and plug these in, and you had to, buy one for each channel. So, you see the one on the bottom right there is 160.56. That was the Santa Fe Road channel back then. And so let's say you had a 20-channel scanner, because there were 20-channel crystal-controlled scanners. You would have to buy 20 of these things, one for each frequency.
Wow.
And, I mean, you're paying $5-10 a piece for these things back then.
Yeah, so, 20 channels, you were up to, what, $200?
Yeah, and that was half the cost of the scanner.
Crazy.
Yeah, but that's how it worked. And at that time, that's basically all we had.
Wow. I've seen a bunch of these in the National Museum.
Yeah. So this was the original Bearcat scanner. Originally, it was just called the Bearcat, and then later they called it the Bearcat 1. And this was a crystal-controlled basic scanner. It had a squelch and a volume control, no lockouts, but you can stop the scan, and then you would flip the little channel select button to move from channel 1 to 2 to 3 if you didn't want to scan. So, bring up Joe's comment. Yeah, very good. Hey, you're reading my mind there, friend.
I already got it.
And Radio Shack had frequency scanners of one type, and Bearcat had scanner crystals of another type. The way the scanners worked is they had a frequency that they would vibrate at, and through a mathematical process that would be converted to the frequency that you would listen to. And in order to do that, you had to use different multipliers and different what they called intermediate frequencies or I frequencies. So Bearcat was what we called 10.8 IF, and Regency and Radio Shack were 10.7. So the crystals were not interchangeable. So you had to tell them what type of radio you had and the frequency you wanted to listen to.
Very interesting. Oops. There we go.
All right. So the top scanner was the Robin. Robin was kind of an East Coast brand. And they were popular in Pennsylvania, Virginia, Maine, in that kind of area. The neat thing about this Robin, and the reason I put it in there is those little color lights for the channels. You could actually unscrew them and put different colors in it. And it came with a bunch of different colors. So you could change the colors on them so that you could have like blue for police and red for fire and green for the highway department, which I always thought was a pretty cool idea back then.
I think so too. It's almost like what you can do on a lot of the Whistler radios and the old GREs is you could set the color light, and you can do it on the Uniden radios as well.
Yeah. Well, back in the day, Motorola and GE made two-way radios, and I think even RCA did at the time. In California, the Highway Patrol radios would have the green channel, the red channel, the blue channel, and that was the color of the light on the front of the radio. So you could kind of replicate that with this. And this RCA scanner is kind of special to me because I had a couple of these in my day, and there was one RCA scanner like this, same model, that myself, my buddy Scott, and my buddy Dan would trade back and forth between the three of us. The thing was built like a brick. It was durable. It worked really well, and it was just a great scanner. And we liked it so much that we used to trade it back and forth between the three of us. Wow.
So we'll continue on here. And it's classic programmable scanners. So let's take a look at those. Here is this one. Is this the one that you were talking about with the switch combination?
Yeah, this was a switch programmable. It's one of the very first programmable scanners made by Tenelec. And this was an engineering company. This guy was a nuclear scientist, the guy that came up with this thing. And he was also a radio hobbyist, and he came up with it. And again, it used the switches just like the original Uniden did a couple years later. You had a book, and you looked up the frequency, and you looked up the sequence to set the switches. You press the program button, and that would put that frequency into that channel.
Wow. So crazy.
And it was such wonderful technology for the day. You didn't have to buy crystals.
Huh. And here we got the next one.
Yeah, this was the OptiScan. This one used a kind of a variation of a punch card. And you bought a bunch of these cards. It came with, I don't know, a couple dozen probably originally, and you can buy more of them. And you would punch out the numbers on the card corresponding to the frequency you wanted to listen to. So you press the button on the scanner, you stick the card in, you press the button again, and that would program the scanner from the card to the channel in the memory.
Wow. And the Bearcat 101 in 1976.
Yeah, this was the same, very similar technology to the Tenelec. You would set the switches in the right pattern and press the button, and that would program the channel.
Wow. And look at this, a keypad.
Ooh. So this was the original 210. This is the one, was it? Yeah, it is the 210. It really was a phenomenal scanner for the day, and I drooled over this thing that my buddy Bob had, and it was awesome to be able to just program the frequency from the keypad without having to, flick all these switches or just to dial in the frequency right into the radio. It was
Yeah, it looks
awesome.
Yeah, I totally could get that.
Yeah. And this was the first, go back to that slide. This was the first scanner of this design. And Bearcat reused this design for a whole bunch of radios. They had the 210, the 210 XL, the XLT, the 218 with 18 channels, which was remarkable. And then it came out the 220, which I think was their first one with the aircraft band, if I recall correctly. And then they had the 2020, which had an A-B switch on the front so that you could program 20 channels for here and 20 channels for there. And then I used that when I would drive from Chicago to Phoenix. I would program Illinois in the first 20 channels and Missouri in the second 20 channels. And then when I approached St. Louis, I'd flip over to the Missouri channels. And then someplace along the way, I would program Bank A for Oklahoma, the next state in line,
Jeez.
And then they had the 250, which was 50 channels.
Ooh.
And then they also used that same case for a bunch of scanners that they private labeled for other companies, most notably Sears and Montgomery Ward. They private labeled Unit and made the scanners, and they put a Montgomery Ward label or a Sears sticker on the scanner and sold them in the Sears and the Montgomery Wards.
Wow. And here's the handheld, the Bearcat 100.
Yeah, this is the one that had 6 AA batteries, and there were 2 screws on the bottom of the radio that you take out to change the batteries. They really weren't intended to be changed, but there were 3 on each side, and that was the only way you could recharge or you could change the batteries. It had a charging port on the back, of course, but like I said, when I'm on a train trip, there was no way to charge the batteries at the time. Now, this was actually the second version of the 100. There was an older version of the 100 that's not pictured, and the difference was the original 100 had didn't have a BNC antenna connector on it like this one.
Oh wow!
It had a headphone jack, and you'd plug the antenna in as a headphone jack. No SMA connectors back then.
Wow!
And then they replaced it with the BNC, which was a vast improvement.
Yes, certainly was. And then we back into Regency, not so long ago. I mean, this is 1984, and it's a larger radio. Of course, with a keypad and a display, and it's highly sensitive.
It was really sensitive. The display was relatively small, kind of hard to see, but it was. I tell you what, it worked great, and you could use it as a wheel chuck for a fire truck.
Wow. And then look at this Regency from 1984, the MX7000, covered 800 megahertz.
Yeah, and that was back in the day when you could still listen to cell phone calls.
Yeah,
and it covered the cell phone bands, and it was actually made by Upatero, which some of the old guys will remember. There was Upatero sold some scanners here. It looked when it first came out, the original ads showed it with the K style of the original Regency slant front scanners that they sold back then. But when it came out, it was quite a bit smaller, and it had that kind of bend in it, which the original Regencies didn't have. This thing was an extremely sensitive scanner. It was a great receiver, but it scanned at about 4 minutes per channel, I think is what it was. I mean, it was going 2, 3. Oh, it was crazy slow scan speed.
Oh, wow. So let's continue on here. And this one looks familiar. I think I've seen this in a Radio Shack.
Yep. The nice thing about the Pro 43 was it was the first scanner that was really easily to obtain that had the military aircraft band. And that was when I first started watching aircraft. There was a Navy air station that I lived basically on the fence line to. And when this came out was why I lived there. And it was great. It was the only scanner back then that you could actually listen to the UHF military aircraft band. And that was awesome.
Yeah, it's something that you don't see too much now on some of these handheld scanners, an independent volume and squelch control.
Yeah.
Usually it's either, on a handheld, it's usually a combination, or it's one knob, it's a push down and turn for the squelch functionality.
Yeah.
Oh, look at these! Look at these units. And when I was working as a media liaison over at the MBTA, this was back in, oh my word, it was back in 2000, in the early 2000s. They had the bottom scanner, the 400 channel radio at the MBTA, which tells you the last time they invested into a scanner was way long time ago.
Well, the 2004, when that first came out, it was in 1986. It was one of the old style metal cases with the non-removable power cord, and it was huge. I actually had 2 of these at the time, one in the house and one mounted in my truck. And I mean, that sucker was big. But it had that huge, big, bright display and 300 channels, which was phenomenal at the time. Eventually, people figured out, well, I figured out what all the different diodes in the diode matrix did. And I actually got my name in Monitoring Times magazine at the time. I went through and inserted or cut all the diodes in that matrix and figured out what each of those diodes did. We found out that one of them increase the scanner to 400 channels.
Oh, wow.
The problem with that is if you take a look at the keypad, it shows you what the bank numbers were, and the bank numbers are all wrong. So there was a guy in Florida who made an overlay decal that you'd put over the keypad that had the replacement numbers, but with the with the 400 channel bank numbers. So instead of bank 1 being 1 to 30, it was bank 1 was 1 to 40. And these scanners had an issue where, and then the 2004s and 5s, where the electroluminescence display would go dim after a few years. And this guy sold replacement displays and would install them. And at that time, I had 6 of these. I had 2 of the 2004s, 2 of the 2005s, and 2 of the 2006s. And I sent all 6 of them into this guy, and he replaced all the displays at once. It was it was expensive, but it was worth it.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, you want to definitely have that display to be able to be illuminated.
Yeah, and there was a lot of mods. I mean, Bill Cheek, rest in peace, made a career out of making mods for these scanners. A couple of mods that I did that he came up with were the expanded memory, which provided 16 separate banks of 400 channels, and it had a little dip switch that you'd mount on the front of the scanner, and you can select which bank of 400 channels you want, which I thought that was just the cat's meow. You had, was it 16 times 400 is, I don't know, what, 6,000 channels or something like that.
Crazy.
Yeah. The cellular mod, which back then you could still listen to phone calls with that. There was another diode that you clipped to make it scan faster. There was one diode that allowed you to go into the European mode, which changed some of the step sizes, and there was all kinds of neat things you could do with that.
So crazy.
Yeah, I still got a 2004 out in my garage. It still works.
Continue on. So we mentioned about this a little bit, where Regency kind of got out of the scanner industry, and then they ended up coming out with a couple of radios later on, and the Realm handheld. I actually have one of those. I wish I had, because I heard that there was really good reviews on its sensitivity.
Yeah, my buddy Matt has one of these, and he loves it. I think he's got one of both of those. So Realm, after their no compete clause with Uniden expired, they came out with these scanners that re-entered the scanner line. By then, they had moved out of Indianapolis and were down in Florida, and they came out with these scanners. They were very well received, but apparently they didn't sell enough of them to stay in the hobby. Very sensitive. Not particularly selective, but at the time it had PL tones and you could put names on the channels, which was still kind of a novel feature. And they're great scanners. They just didn't have enough market penetration to continue it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they were really cool scanners. So, I still have the portable. I should try it out on some of the railroad frequencies, just to see how reception is down here. Have you ever seen one of these?
I played with one for a while. I never owned one, but this was one of the very first PC controllable handheld scanners out there. And I don't think they sold all that well, but they were pretty well received. They just, I think it was ahead of its time.
Yeah, and who would have thought, Sony would come out with the, they had several receivers, but this one was the one that had full coverage of the frequency bands.
Yeah, it was kind of a one-off type of thing. They made a couple airband scanners, which apparently was very popular in Japan, and they private labeled some stuff as well. But again, it just didn't go over that well here.
All right, and we'll continue on, and then these are starting to look a little bit more familiar to modern day. We've got a couple of Unidens here from the 90s, the BC 60 XLT, the BC 80 XLT, and the BC 125 XLT. So these were, as they were starting to look a little bit more modern. They had keypads, and the display was, still fairly simple. There was no alpha tagging at that point. But, you still had 30 channel, 50 channel scanners, in the early 90s.
Yeah, and if they look similar to a lot of Radio Shack scanners of that same time frame, some of these were private labeled for Radio Shack as well.
This was my first scanner. It was a 200 channel analog conventional scanner. It was a desktop unit. I programmed this one multiple times through the keypad, and I would just spend hours and hours listening to it. And I love this radio. This was the first. I wish I still had it. My dad gave me my first scanner, and he never really owned a scanner in his lifetime. So he got me one of these because I was just so fascinated with communications, and sure enough, I ended up being hooked on it. This was another.
If you go back to that one, from Radio Shack, does it look familiar to GRE fans?
Yeah, I'm sure it does, because it looks very much like a GRE.
Yeah, it was made by GRE, and that would have been the PSR 200. And I think Whistler still has it as the 1025.
Yeah,
or something very similar to it.
It hasn't really changed very much, and this was in the early. I'm pretty certain that this is the radio. I don't have it anymore, but I believe this is it. I got it in the late 80s, early 90s, somewhere around there. So let's continue on. This was my next radio that I had. This was when I switched over to the Uniden side. This one had 100 channels, 10 banks. And this was the BC 860 XLT. And I programmed this sucker up, and I programmed it often, reprogrammed it. I've heard a lot of stuff on that scanner. I listened to for everything from the state police low band to railroads to the local police and fire there. Awesome scanner. Let's get into analog trunking. So this was one of the first handheld radios for analog trunking, Rich.
Yeah, this was the 235. We spoke about that earlier. This was the first trunk tracker, and it supported Motorola phase 1 type 1 and 2, but only on 800 megahertz. I think it might have done 900. I don't remember. I think it might have only did 800. I'm not sure, but it was the original trunk tracking scanner. And I remember the first system I used to listen to on this was the O'Hare Airport Motorola Type 1 system that I used this on, and it worked. It was the only one we had at the time, but it worked and worked very well.
And then, how can we forget this one? This was the one that I had, in my house. I had a couple of these. This was, I'm sure some people mounted this as a mobile radio, but it must have been honking huge in the vehicle.
Yeah, well, it didn't have mounting screws on the side, so I've seen them in people's cars before, but I mean, like I said, that sucker was big. So I don't know why they came out with such a huge scanner. I mean, if you take a look inside the scanner, there's nothing in there. I mean, it's one board, and 90% of that's airspace inside that scanner. They could have made that scanner that wide.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely, we could have done a small scanner. Oh, this radio is one of my favorites. This is the BC 246T. This was the first one of the. I've had a couple of portable radios, but this was my favorite radio. And you could ask my dad. I took this radio with me all over the place. I actually had two of them. I loved it so much that I wanted another one. When I first got my driver's license, this was the radio that I had in the vehicle. And I used it so much, I wore down the keypad. It was at the point where you couldn't read what the number 1, the number 2, and the number 3, and so on. I used this radio all the time, and of course, it was PC programmable. And it had alpha tagging display, which I loved. Coming from radios that didn't have it. To finally have radios, and it had look how much memory it had, Rich.
1,600 channels. Wow. I mean, at that time, that was totally remarkable. And to be able to access all of those channels at the same time was cool. And, and it was the first one with that DMA.
Trunking, and certainly an awesome radio. And then, of course, I had two of these, one in the house and one in the vehicle. I didn't buy them at once. But, slowly, I got a second one. And this one was the 780 XLT, which was a classic of its time, 500 channels, trunking, 2 lines of alpha tagging. I mean, look at that. I mean, that display was probably one of the largest of its time. I mean, now probably the largest scanner display in the unit inside is the SDS 200.
Well, the neat thing about this one is that it replaced the older, huge Bearcat scanners like the 895 and the 9000 and all that stuff, and it packed all that performance in a much smaller package. It was a little bit larger than the 760, a little bit taller, but it was it started that mobile-oriented form factor.
All right, so now we're going to dive into the first digital scanners. So we'll take a look at this. We actually hinted this. There's one of those cards. When I started working at Scanner Master, a lot of people were looking for those cards. And, we got calls over years and years and years, people looking for it. And then after a while, I had to tell them, well, you got to look on eBay or someplace like that because they're hard to come by.
We still get calls looking for those things.
Yeah, and there it is right there.
Yeah. Now the 250 handheld and the 296 that followed it was really kind of unique because it had that little turn knob.
Oh yeah, right there. Yeah, I see it. Yeah, it's right over here. I don't know if you can see.
Yeah, it looks like my internet stopped for a couple seconds there, but it had that knob, that little turn knob, that rotary controller on the front of the scanner below the display.
Yeah, and that was pretty neat. And then the 785D also, you could scroll through programming as well.
Yeah, Joe mentioned earlier in a comment that the P25 card, the BCI 25D card, was kind of similar to the M2 memory cards that we use for SSDs these days. It was
Amazing.
kind of the same form factor.
And then let's take a look at some remote heads now. This one was actually a Scanner Master Curation. This was the RSC-1 remote head kit for the 780 XLT. Although I had two 780s, I didn't have the remote head.
Yeah. I had one of these. I put it on my 796 because it also worked on that. And it was a lot of work to put on. It was not for the faint of heart. There was soldering involved. And so when you have a $600 or $700 radio and then a $500 or $600 remote head, and then spend a good 3 or 4 hours of work soldering and hope, and just pray that it worked. So basically what you did is you disassembled the radio. You took the case apart, you removed the head, you removed a couple ribbon connectors. It came with a back plate for the head that you put on the back and you wired it into the head. And that back plate had an RJ45 connector on it. And then a front plate for the scanner box itself with a matching plug. And you had to do a bunch of wiring because it had a circuit board on each side. And then you could put a Cat 5 cable, and I had one in my van at the time where I put the radio in the back and put the head up on the dashboard, and it worked great. The only thing it didn't have a speaker.
Yeah, and this I saw on Scanner Master's website. We sold it just the head kit, and then we actually, I think at one point, they sold it already done. And that was very expensive. I want to say it was somewhere $1,000, for it to be completely done.
Well, yeah, it had to be because I mean the 780 at the time was a $500 radio, and the head was probably at least a $500 option, and plus the work involved. But like I say, it used to work on the 796 as well, and that was, I mean, if you had one of those on a 796, that was the cream of the crop.
And then who could forget the BCRH96? I used this one in the vehicle for many years. And this was manufactured in 2009. And then Uniden actually discontinued it. And then Rich actually approached Uniden and saying, we would like to have a production run of these if you still have parts. They agreed upon it. And then we ended up selling it exclusively at Scanner Master. And that thing was selling like crazy because we were the only ones that had it. I worked at Scanner Master at this point. I was doing the social media and I was promoting it like crazy. And we sold out of it. We had at least 2 production runs of it. And then, it came to the point where Uniden didn't have any more parts. And they said, this is it. This is the end of the production run. But there was a firmware update that, in our production run of it would work on the XT scanners like the 996XT, the 15X, and the 396X and the 436X. So it worked on the original T versions of these radios, and then it also worked on the XT versions.
And we still get calls looking for these things to this day. And we had when we moved across the street, we found a dozen or so of these that had been returned or in B stock. So we sold them with no guarantee, as is, and they sold out within.
Yeah, it was a short period of time.
Yeah, I got 6 of these. They're in my garage now. I used to use them in my vehicle, but now that I've got a car, that I don't need them anymore. But I still keep them because one of these days I might need them. I ran across a guy who created a an adapter box that make these work with the 996P2 and the 325P2. And I've got that, and it does work with them. But I mean, this adapter box, you have to hand make it. It's a converter, and there's quite a bit of latency on it. But boy, I wish they worked with the 996P2s.
Yeah, I would totally love another scanner with a remote head. I mean, we've talked about that during several shows, but that's certainly something that's on our wish list there. The zip code era, which is almost the current era that we're in right now. And here's the first radio that was able to do that. Revolutionary was the Uniden Bearcat Home Patrol, and then it ended up being called the Home Patrol 1 because it was the first one of two. And this was manufactured in 2010, the first zip code based programmable scanner, and the first scanner with a touchscreen display. I mean, we haven't had a scanner with a touchscreen display up to this point, and Uniden still is the only manufacturer with a touchscreen display. Whistler or Radio Shack at this point didn't do anything with that.
And this was such a groundbreaking scanner at the time, and I didn't really realize it, at the time. But not only was it a desktop scanner, but you could unplug the cable and run it on the internal batteries, and had an SD card built into it for the memory. With the touchscreen, I knew a lot of guys would walk around carrying them as a handheld.
Yeah, I mean, we have the travel case.
Yep.
I don't have that right. I did have it right beside me, but I don't have it right now. The traveling case, which I worked on designing that for the company. A lot of the cases I had an active role of looking at the samples and setting feedback to our manufacturer. All of the travel cases that we have are manufactured right here in the United States. So that's something that we pride ourselves on. Also, taking a look at GRE, this is their first zip code based scanner. This is the GRE Psr 800. And then there's many versions of this, for Whistler, created one. And then there was the GRE Psr 900, which was never released. And then eventually
a couple engineering samples out there. Yeah.
And then it was eventually released by Whistler. But I wonder how much those sample versions of the Psr 900 go for nowadays.
I've actually seen one. I had a friend of mine brought one to Dayton one year and showed it to me, and it was like that was cool. And that removable head, and that was just before Whistler came out with their version of it, which was the 1095. And then they came out with the improved version, which was the 1088, and that added the keyboard to the radio, and then the 1098, which was the mobile version, again with the numeric keyboard. Because if you take a look, there's no number pad on this.
Yeah, no keyboard at all.
And then they came out with the TRX1 and TRX2, which not only had the keypad, and the original ones had DMR. And then the TRX1 and 2 added more memory and the ability to do NXDN. And that's the current ones that Whistler are still selling is the TRX1 and 2.
Yeah, and this is certainly, came a long way, this radio here. So we're approaching the halfway point of the broadcast, and we wanted to just tell you about a couple of things. If you got some scanner questions, certainly you can talk to us via email at support@scannermaster.com. You give us a call at 1-800-722-6637. And we're open Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern Time. We will be closed on Friday, the day before 4th of July. So that's July 3rd. You could shop Scannermaster online at 24/7 at scannermaster.com. And they are our sponsor. Make sure you sign up for the Scannermaster newsletter. Always great stuff in there. You'll learn about upcoming sales and also new products and so on. So make sure you do that as well. And next week's broadcast, which is going to be July the 8th, we're going to be talking about scanner hacks. So various things, features on the radios that you don't typically use all the time. We're going to explain them and how they operate, and you may find yourself using some new features on the scanner and things that you didn't know that you could do with your scanner. So we're going to certainly cover those next week. Should be a fun show. That's July the 8th, right here on YouTube. So make sure you subscribe to the Scanner Guys YouTube channel. That's 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. Pacific, right here on YouTube. So make sure if you're watching us for the first time on our YouTube channel, make sure you subscribe. And then we're always looking for your stupid scanner tricks and shack photos. Email those over to us at thescannerguys@gmail.com. That's thescannerguys@gmail.com. And if you're a fan of trains, make sure you follow my blog, which is trainaficionado.com. You can follow my social media right there on the screen. Train Aficionado on Facebook and Instagram, and on Twitter at Rail Aficionado right there on the screen. So make sure you do that as well. And don't forget to like and subscribe to Scanner Master as well on social media, on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube at the Scanner Master Co. And then the Scanner Guys social media. We have the most social media there with Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram at the Scanner Guys. So now we're going to take some comments from everybody that's watching. Post your questions if you're watching us on Facebook or on YouTube. Post them in the comments. We'll be able to see them all this evening right here live on our show. So now it's time to turn it over to our audience for the Romper Room edition of the show, which Rich likes to call it.
Yeah. All righty. So we got a couple shout outs to a couple of our regulars, Chris and Dave and Quincy, bunch of guys that we speak to all the time. So we are running a little late, so we'll just kind of cruise through them. I wanted to say we do read every single comment. So Steve and Dave, Sarah, hey guys. Oh, my buddy Ray. Yes, Joe, we do spoo such a good stuff. We were talking about spooing kind of all kinds of stuff. Yeah, we do spoo good stuff. I got another guy from Bermuda. We get Don from Bermuda. Howdy, howdy. Tony is checking in from PG. Quincy had his first scanner was a Pro 23 that he bought back in the 80s. And he still has it. I know a couple guys who still have every scanner they've ever owned for the last 40 years.
Wow.
I don't. I usually sell or trade them or give them away or something like that when I get new ones. But, of course, I got a lot of newer ones. Bunch of check-ins, Lincoln, Steve, Jimmy. 7 months. Yeah, we're in 7 months. Now it's starting to think about Christmas gifts.
Yeah.
Christmas in July. Okay. Jerry's in Cincinnati. John had in Jersey had a Regency 8-channel crystal. My first scanner was a 8-channel Regency scanner as well, VHF high band only. Kevin is in the very first suburb, Levittown, PA. Dale is a government employee. He gets a 3-day weekend. Well, some of us do. I'm no longer a government employee, but I get a 3-day weekend this week as well. Let's see, buddy from Kentucky. Let's see here. John had a Regency Programmable. Oh, the thin scan. Yeah, Joe. The Bearcat thin scan. It was just that. It was a very thin scanner. And I think it had 6 channels and VHF and UHF with crystals. And so it was about as thin as you can get for a crystal scanner. And it was remarkable. And it had a metal case to it. It was actually very solid feeling radio. Didn't work all that well, but it was a pretty decent scanner. At least the one that I had didn't work that well. Let's see here. There's Jerry. Yeah, good day, eh? Yep. We're talking about Canada Day today. One of our watchers is upstate New York. He really enjoyed last week's show about the train, so he's obviously a rail fan. crystals remind Steve of Chiclet's gum. Yeah, they were about the same size. So, yeah, Joe reminds us that Union bought Ltr around the early 80s, maybe as early as 78. Until then, the Bearcat scanners were still made by Ltr. So, yeah, we talked about that. And a lot of people, think of Bearcat as Uniden, but up until around 1980 or so, it was actually wasn't part of Uniden at all. And let's see here. Buddy Jay from Papillon, Nebraska. Howdy, howdy. Dale, his first scanner was a EF Johnson Duo Scan, VHF and UHF. Then he had a PACE scanner. And then he had some of the programmable ones. So there were a lot of companies out there that made scanners that that we didn't mention. I mean, we talked about coming up with some of the lesser brands like RCA, but I mean, there was Pace and Robin and Tenlec, and there was just there was probably 50 or 60 different scanner manufacturers back in the 70s and 80s. Cobra, a lot of companies that made CB radios branched into scanners as well. And then one of our other, Jim mentions that the scanners, they looked very similar, but they weren't interchangeable. We talked about that a little bit. Some of the scanners that would work on a frequency on one scanner would work on a slightly different frequency if you put it to the other scanner. And occasionally I was able to come up with a usable scanner frequency by using a Regency scanner and a Bearcat scanner, or vice versa. It might have been a couple kilohertz off, but it usually worked. It was usually close enough. But you had to be kind of lucky to get that to work. We talked about the different IFs. Frank had a Pro 7 and a Patrolman. So Radio Shack had several product lines, and their scanner product line was a Realistic and Patrolman. And I don't really know why they had two different names for scanners. I don't know, maybe Patrolman might have been the handheld and Realistic might have been the desktops or something like that. But they had a couple different product lines, and Realistic and Patrolman were used for their scanners. Sears did sell a punch card scanner. They private labeled not only the Unidens, but they also private labeled, I think, the SBE OptiScan. And Joe says the OptiScan was better than the Whammo. The SBE used cards, and you can remove the sticker, and then the light would shine through it. It was an optical binary system. Welcome back, Johnny. And Fan and Courier, that was another blast from the past. Let's see here. Clarion, that was another scanner company. Alicia had a Bearcat 250. Johnny, we're making you feel old. For those of you who had some of these old scanners that we've talked about, you are probably vintage yourself. So the 210 begat the 210A, and then the 210XL, the XLT, the 2XW, the 220, and a lot of the other rebranded clones. Yep, we talked about that. That was a great product line for Uniden, and they made a lot of hay out of that same design. And this one, the Bearcat 8-track player. That was I was looking for a picture of that. I used to have one of those. I bought it from my dad, who was really into 8-tracks. He had an 8-track player in the car. They actually worked, which was surprising. I think it was a 4 or 6 channel crystal scanner that you just put into your 8-track player, and it used the audio system for your car. The thing worked. It was pretty goofy, but it worked. So let's see here. Kevin's first scanner was a 55 XLT from Bearcat. Danny liked the old scanners. They usually worked a lot better than the digital junk that he's got now. I don't know. The new scanners now, they're much more selective now. They're not as sensitive as the old scanners were, but they're much more selective. And it's usually an inverse relationship. The higher sensitivity radios are usually relatively poor in selectivity. And then as you get more selective, the sensitivity goes down. So you got to kind of get that good balance in between the two of them. Selectivity, if you have a highly selective scanner, then you didn't have a lot of adjacent channel noise, but they're usually not as sensitive as the older scanners. So if you're in a city, you used to buy the selective scanners, and if you're out in the country, you bought the sensitive scanners. Let's see here. Jim's first scanner was a 4-channel crystal portable from about 1980, and the scanner books was like his Bible. So yeah, remember the police call? We've spoken about those many times. And of course, the Scanner Master guides. You know, I've written a few of those, and you had a lot of input in those. I was a contributor to the police call magazine, books. So every year I got a box with the complete 9-volume set every year, which I thought was good. That's what you got if you were and he had a word for it. I'm trying to remember the term for it. But if you were a contributor, good information and a lot of it, then you got that free copy of those books every year. And at one point when I was moving, I had a stack of police calls. Remember copy paper boxes that would hold 10 reams of copy paper? Yep. I had 4 boxes of police calls.
Wow.
Full of. I finally had to get rid of those because I was moving them from apartment to apartment. I didn't have room.
Yeah, I'm sure.
So Joe reminds us that the BC100 was still made by Ltr. It was the 100 XLT was the Uniden version of that. So Mike, our buddy from Mississauga, happy Canada Day. Yeah, it looks like he's still having some issues with his SDS 100. So I guess he's going to have to do work with that. So I've had an SDS 100 from the get-go, and I'm actually on my, 3rd or 4th unit? How many beta versions did we have?
It was quite a few of them.
Yeah, and mine was from the very first production run, the one that we have now, and it works like a champ, and the thing's on 24/7, and I take it with me on weekends and stuff, so he must have gotten a lemon. Yeah, the BC100 had 16 programmable channels. That was yeah, wow. That's all you could really say. And Dave had a Realm 200, still works great. Yeah, my buddy Matt's got one. He loves that thing. CompuScan. That was with the black box Uniden scanner. So again, you had to program it by computer, and if you didn't have a computer, then basically it was worthless. But it was ahead of its time. Johnny's got a scanner that's working fine in his feed, and so if you buy a 996 or a BCT 15 or 15X, they have a record jack on the back. They're great for feed radios.
Yeah, we're actually going to talk about that next week. That's going to be one of the scanner hacks. You're giving a preview.
Preview, yeah, there you go. Okay, it wasn't a mistake. It was a preview for next week.
Yeah.
So Joe. Oh, okay. I understand Johnny's question now. He was actually there was one of our watchers was having issue with our video. And it turns out it wasn't us. It was them. So, all right, back to Romper Room here.
Yes.
So Joe tells us that Regency and Realm also made a popular land mobile radios. I had one of their VHF two-way radio portable radios, and it was my main railfan scanner for a while. It was a two-way radio just because it worked so well. It was they were pretty good. They were very sensitive, but if you get into the city, they were worthless because they had the selectivity of a turnip.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, they were really poor selectivity wise, but boy, those things were sensitive. Dave's got an 898T. That was one of those great big old lunchbox size radios.
Yep.
around the late 80s, the BC300 was a great model that had dedicated service search buttons. I remember those. I had one for about 6 months, and I ended up trading that for something else that I don't remember what at the time, but I did a lot of that. I would buy a radio and then trade it to somebody for something else. But that had a fluorescent display, and I think it was like green or bluish color display. And it had a whole bunch of service search buttons, police, fire, railroads, aircraft, all along below the display. And you could pick a service search. And that was pretty cool. And it was long and wide, wide radio, like, yay big. It was big. Let's see here. Tony had a 245 XLT. That was the first trunk tracker that had EDEX. And I was one of the beta testers for that because we had the EDEX system in Chicago area for the state police, and it worked very well. And that's when we discovered that the AFS programming was not real. So it was a myth at the time. Basically, the programmers that were designing this stuff figured out that system based on a couple of the systems that they were able to hear. And then with the Illinois State Police system, we realized that it must have been a coincidence because the state police system was put in by the same technicians, and it didn't follow that same protocol. There was one kind of an aside here. There's one thing you can always tell which crew installed an EDEX system, which engineering crew, because they always had talk group, I think it was 1047, they always called it the holodeck channel. And that was the technicians channel that they used to talk amongst themselves. They were obviously Star Trek fans. And I'm sure 1047 or the hex version of it or something like that had something to do with Star Trek lore, but they always call it the holodeck channel. So the state police system in Chicago, the Will County system, there was a couple of systems up in suburban Milwaukee. They all had 1047 as the holodeck channel. Let's see here. The Radio Shack, John had the triple trunking scanner, the Pro 39. Yeah, that was a little Radio Shack handheld scanner. The 780 had remote control. Yep, you can do that with the serial port. You can, I think it was ARC 780, and I think there might have been a couple other programs that had virtual control on that. Oh, Ltr Trunking. Yeah, that was the third model, third version of trunking that was very popular. There's still Ltr out there now, but it's nowhere near as common as it used to be. We should do a show on different trunking versions. So
yeah,
Ltr
definitely
works quite a bit different than the other trunking systems, but let's see here. So yeah, the P25 board was optional on the 785 and the 250. But it came standard with the 796 and the 296. Let's see here. Alicia had the Radio Shack Pro 77, the Bearcat 250. She had a bunch of scanners, and she still has a couple of them. The 330, the 330T, that was a great scanner. Not only was it a decent scanner, but you'd also listen to shortwave broadcasts on it. As far as I know, it's the only real scanner that you could actually listen to HF. It only did AM mode on HF, but you could do, but you could actually listen. I had that when I was on a camping trip up in Maine, and I used it to listen to Radio Canada on 6,000 kilohertz. Let's see here. Oh, Joe, yeah, on the bag phone scanner. That's what that case was for the 780.
Yep.
Yeah, and and the Pro 43 was the portable scanner to have at the time. Yeah, I actually had two of the Pro 43s. The problem with the Pro 43 was that keyboard would wear out. Like you wore out your keyboard on your other scanner, that would wear out really quickly because of the way the numbers were printed on the buttons. So what I did is I was going through those about once a year, and I had that scanner for several years. That I actually went to Radio Shack, and they were only about $4 or $5 a piece, and I bought 10 of them. And I used a couple of them because I had 2 or 3 of these radios myself, and I had a bunch of friends with them. And when I finally got rid of my last Pro 43, I gave the one remaining keyboard replacement part to the guy that I sold the radio to.
Wow.
I am now on my third water bottle for those that are keeping track of things. Water, not vodka. That comes later. So Steve says the SDSs have a poor front end and overload, but they work great on digital. I've heard that a little bit, but mine actually works pretty well on VHF. I haven't used it much on UHF, but have you noticed any issues with your SDS?
VHF, I found it works pretty well, and then for the most part, VHF for the railroads works great. And as for UHF, I didn't have any issues when I was in Massachusetts. With the 100. I got the 200 when I was down here.
Yeah.
But yeah, I haven't had any major issues.
So Steve, check your firmware version. Make sure you have the latest version of firmware, because I know the firmware, the later versions of the firmware did clear up some issues on VHF and UHF down the road. So Will is late. He missed the first almost hour. Gee. Will, set your alarm clock. Let's see here. I'm going to skip Joe's comment because I don't want to give away. Oh, the heck with it. Why not? It's everybody knows anyway. So yeah, when I said it was a universally known at the time, yeah, that was a directed pun. When the SDS was prematurely made visible on a website. So they atoned for their sins. Our buddies at Universal Radio, they're good guys. They were building their website, and it got released a couple days or a couple weeks early, and they were very apologetic for it. And anybody can make a mistake. You imagine if we did that?
Yeah. Do you see Dale's comment on the screen right now?
Yeah, get scanned. Yeah. Well, here, wait a minute. Where's my Sharpie? Yep. Like I say, I'll go through 4 or 5 bottles in a 2-hour show, but here we are, almost 2 hours in, and I'm only on my third bottle. So
yeah, I think because you've been talking more than you've been drinking.
Mm-hmm. I know, and my wife tells me I talk too much. So, but she's never heard a word I said.
Nope.
So, which you could say for most wives or husbands, I suppose.
Yeah.
So what happened to the X36s? So they are still manufactured and still a frontline radio. They have been kind of overshadowed by the SDSs, of course, but they are still a more economical alternative to the SDSs if you don't have simulcast in your area. I've got 2 536s here and another one on my truck, and I've got a 436. And they work great, but I just can't use them when in a simulcast area. So if they're not using simulcast, the 536 is a great alternative, and save yourself a couple $100. Let's see here. Tunable receivers were great for finding new frequencies. Pre close call, yeah, and the manual version of close call, you could just tune the knob until you found something, and then you'd have to figure out what frequency they were actually on.
Tunable, yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah, and Dale reminds us they were using 30 kilohertz channel spacing back then when those were popular. So nowadays the frequencies are as close as 5.5 kilohertz or 7.5 kilohertz apart, but back then they were 30 kilohertz on VHF and 25 on UHF. So the frequencies went from like 155.25 to 155.28 to 155.31. And then late 70s, early 80s, they slashed that in half. So it went 155.25 to 155.265 to 155.28. And then, about 10 years ago, they sliced it again to 7.5 instead of 12.5 or 15. Yeah. So it would be 155.25, then 155.2575, and then 155.265. Yeah, it was basically just kept on slicing things in half. So, kind of fish am I? No, I drink a lot of water, but you notice I have not gotten up to go to the bathroom. I've gone as many as 6 bottles of water through a 2.5 hour show, and then spend another half hour talking with Jonathan before I had to hit the John. Ltr still has a bunch of crystals. I actually got rid of my last bunch of crystals or batch of crystals when I was getting ready to move out here to Arizona, and I was cleaning out my basement, and I had this big, huge pile of radio stuff, and I brought it to a couple Karma meetings and gave most of it away. And one of them was a box of crystals. So I had a plastic box, yay big, with a piece of styrofoam in there that I would stick the crystals in. And then I had a piece of styrofoam on the top to keep it from rattling. And that protected the crystals from damage. And I probably had 40 or 50 of them in there. But I hadn't had a crystal scanner in 10 or 15 years by then. Wow. So, let's see here. Yeah, I live in Phoenix, so all my water gets hot. Yeah. Actually, we keep the air conditioning down to about the mid 70s, lower 80s here. So the water does stay relatively cool. Rich had a BC1 in his garage until about 2002. Worked great until everything went trunking. Yeah. Everything out here in Arizona went trunking. Yeah, right around 2000. Phoenix was kind of the last, one of the last conventional systems out here. I think Glendale went trunking pretty early in the, when I first started coming out here, they were already moving over to trunking.
Oops.
That was 30 years ago. Let's see here. Frank says they had Regency scanners at Sears in, how do you pronounce that city?
Methuen. Nothing doing in Methuen.
Okay. And what's that other city out there called? Worcester?
Yeah, Worcester, not Worcester.
I had somebody call me today who actually lived in another state, but they got relatives that live up there, and they pronounced it Worcester. And I said, no, that's Worcester. Oh, you must be from there. I said, well, no, but I didn't have time to tell her the whole backstory. I'm from Chicago. We actually use all the letters in the word. So, yeah, Joe said that crystals were interchangeable between Regency and Unit scanners, or Bearcat scanners at the time. They were just 100 kilohertz off. So you had a frequency for 155.25. It would work on 155.35, and being only 5 kilohertz from 155.355, it would usually be close enough. Alicia says Radio Shack was her second home. Yeah, I spent so much time in the Radio Shack that they offered me a job, and at the time I had a better job than that. But if I was in there, somebody would ask for something, and I don't know, but that guy, he knows. Yeah, he doesn't even work here. I get the same thing. I go into Ham Radio Outlet every once in a while, and the guys recognize me as the guy from Scanner Master, and somebody be asking about a scanner. Come here, you talk to him for me.
Yeah, you got to put us on payroll.
Yeah. Yeah, but they take care of me over there. So, where am I? Here we are. Steve writes that his dad got him a used one. My first scanner was that Regency 8 channel that my dad bought from a buddy of his who worked on a neighboring police department, and it already had the crystals in it for the area that I lived in, plus the area that he was in, which was a little bit further away, which got me interested in listening to those guys because I had the crystals for them. So that's it. Mark had an SBE. And Rich still has his 210 in his garage for Phoenix Fire. Yeah, they still transmit the calls on the VHF 154.19 out here. Their dispatch channel, and it's just basically the computer voice telling the fire department where they're going. Dave still has the Midland 8-channel crystal scanner. Still works. He got it back in the mid-70s. Mark also had a 220. Let's see here. How many? Oh, that's a good question, Joe. How many 210s did they sell? Everybody had one. I wish I still had one as a conversation piece. And, you know, I wish I kind of had my own little scanner museum, but my wife would never let me. She makes me get rid of stuff that I'm not using them.
Well, I know where there's a whole bunch of scanners where you can create your own museum.
My wife would kill me until I was dead, and then she would kill me again just to make sure I was dead a second time.
You know what I really wish we did, thinking out loud during this broadcast, is when I was packing them away, I really wish, you know, he had you come out and we could have packed it away together, and we could have done the digital police scanner museum online. You know, the scanners are not digital, but our museum is.
Yeah. Oh, that would have been ideal. That would have been great. And then I could have helped you guys, you know, move across the street too.
Yeah.
So, all right. So Joe brings up, we were talking about the Bearcat 100, the original 100, and he thought it might have been a threaded connection. You know what, Joe? I think you're right. I had other scanners. It had a headphone style jack. It was a micro, you know, a headphone jack antenna. I think it was a Midland, but you're right, Joe. It was the 100 had a threaded. It was a wasn't an SMA, but it was an inside thread, and the antenna screwed onto it, not a BNC. Ltr still has her 1500. That was a great scanner. And Rich tells us that they use that same case for the two-way radios, the Regency, the HX 1500s and such. Yeah, that I had that Regency two-way radio VHF that I used for rail fanning because I liked that Regency scanner so much. I bought the VHF radio and it worked really well. So yeah, further on for that Bearcat 100, it had the antenna had the male end, which went into the radio. So the radio itself had the female end that had the inside threads. Mark had a 2006 with the cellular and the faster scan speed mod. Yep, I had several of those. And my 2005 was the one that I had the memory mod on that was 6,400 channels. And the Pro 43, the very earliest ones came with the cell phones already enabled. And then you could actually make the mod on the later version to unlock the cell phone frequencies. At that time, it was still legal, but not for long. But nowadays, even if you had one of those scanners, you wouldn't be able to hear cell phone frequencies. It just doesn't work anymore. So I guess they can hear my one of those scanners in the background. I usually try to remember to turn the volume down on the scanners before the show starts, so I don't disturb the show. But every once in a while, I'll forget. There's a few of them up there. I'll usually forget one or two, and I can't hear them with the headphones on. Jerry still has his 2004, still works great. Yeah, I got one out in my garage. I use it out there, and it works good. One thing the 2004s did is the volume controls would get noisy. So when you adjusted the volume control, you'd hear that scratchy noise.
Yeah.
I used tuner cleaner on those. And there was another thing you could do too. If you take them apart, you could actually tighten the volume control, and that would fix that sometimes. See here, Larry is looks like he's in Bermuda. He's looking for a way to locate his police and ambulance and fire departments in Bermuda since they've changed their radios, and he's got a BC 436. Well, first I would check on radio reference and see where they were. And then if they aren't where they were, or at least what's listed in there, start tuning around the 800 band or whatever frequency bands they were using. And also try close call. If you get close enough to one of the guys, see if you can start hearing them a close call, or just put the radio in limit search and see if you can find them. And also watch the radio reference forums. Oftentimes you'll see where they're at in the forums before it makes the database as people are trying to confirm the stuff. So they might say, hey, Bermuda fire departments have moved over to this new UHF trunking system or what have you. And while it might not be enough information to put it in the database, it's enough information for you to start looking for them. Let's see here. Quincy's got the 2006. It was an amazing scanner. Yep. Cordless phones. Yeah. Those are almost universally gone nowadays as well. But that used to be a big target for a lot of listeners. It get boring awful quick, but yeah, you could listen to the older cordless phones. These days, again, they use spread spectrum. I can never say that. So it's very difficult to listen to cordless phones. Let's see here. Great topic. Judy had to leave early because she's going to work, or is it Judy or Vinny, one or the other? Hope you're working safe tonight. Let's see here. Alicia had a 3000 XLT, was pre-trunking. Those were great scans. Those were the big, that was the handheld version of the 8000, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I was into Regencies and Radio Shack scanners at that time. I didn't get into the unit until a little later, for the most part. Yeah, one of those old scanners would work great in a 55 Buick. Yeah, one of those old tunable receivers. You'd have more room for those things, and they were big, but I don't think they had 12-volt power cords on them.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I didn't have one of those.
Yeah. Jerry had two of the 296Ds. Vern still uses his 250D for aircraft traffic. The 780 had a great reputation for military and civil aircraft bands. There was a guy down in Florida, I don't remember his name, but he had probably a dozen or more 780s that he used for military aircraft, and he was quite well known for it. And they were really, really good for it. And I've often thought about getting some of those because they worked so well on both the military and the civil aircraft band. Steve has got a Pro 2024. It's a 60 channel scanner. He still works in his he's got in his room. Those old analog conventional scanners, they still work if they're not using trunking.
Yeah, that's for sure.
The county just to my north still uses conventional VHF, and those scanners would still work there. Joe's got two of the RH96s. Yep. They are like gold. We get people calling all the time asking for them. Hated Hacker. That's a great screen name. He loves his BCC 15X as his scanner feed. We talked about that briefly. That's got the record jack, so we'll talk about that more next week.
Yeah.
The HP1 was the first scanner with internal recording. That was a great feature at the time.
Yes.
And now all the zip code scanners have that. But you could record right to the SD card, and you could play it back on the scanner, or stick the SD card in the computer or connect it to the computer and copy them off onto the computer. That was a great thing. I used to use a program called Scanner Recorder, and to record onto the computer. That worked really well. We got a request to do a demo on the Jim M75 amp. We can do that. I've got one here, so maybe we'll do that one of our shows.
I got one, I think, somewhere around here.
Yeah, we'll compare with and without. I'm not a big fan of preamps in an urban area because they amplify noise. And the best place to put an amp is at the antenna versus at the radio. But with the M75, it's really designed to go right on the radio. It's really designed to be a handheld scanner. But if you're in a rural area, the amplifiers will help you. But if you're in an urban area, I wouldn't bother. Let's see here. I lost my place. I've got lots of comments to go through. So
yeah, a lot. That Patrick was the next one after that.
Okay. There it is. I found it. Yeah. So Patrick, the HP1 is also the first one to show unit IDs. Joe says, and I trust Joe on this because he does know what he's talking about most of the time. But they, okay, yeah. So that's the explanation on that. It toggled back and forth between the talk group ID and the radio ID. The HP1 is the first one that had a dedicated line for the radio ID. So for those who are wondering what that is, the radio ID is the actual individual radio number for the guy talking. So if you had a two-way radio here and another two-way radio here, when this radio was talking, it would say radio ID 1234, and when this was talking, it would say radio 3241. So it would actually give you the numbers, and then you could actually program those into your scanner and show up, and you figure out that okay, that's fire department dispatcher, or this one is truck 17. You could actually program those in so you know exactly who was talking. And the Home Patrol was one of the only models with resizable fonts. I didn't know you could change the size of the fonts. I'll have to try that.
I haven't done that, so I'll have to mess with that too.
Yeah. Oh, see, hey, even the scanner guys can learn stuff.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Dave had a Pro 39. Next broadcast time and date. Well, our broadcasts are always 7 o'clock Eastern time on Wednesdays.
Yep, and I can post up our thing right here. I can do that right now just by the magic of a click here. And there you go. There's our next week's show. Wednesday, July the 8th. Will be at 8 p.m. Eastern time, 5 p.m. Pacific, right here on YouTube on the Scanner Guys YouTube channel.
Cool. Grant is in Melbourne, Australia, down under, and he found out about us from the Scanner School. That Scanner School is a great is another great site, and we like those guys. So go check out their Facebook page, and you'll get a lot of good information from them.
Yeah, and they're also they have a weekly broadcast as well, where they do a podcast.
Yeah. Keep an eye on that one. Don got in late. Did we talk about the BC 300 and 350? We did talk about them briefly. We didn't show pictures of them, but the 300 had that server search buttons and the fluorescent display. Looking for show topics? Let us know, and we will be glad to put those on our list. Rick has got a 396 XT, and he wants to pull the trigger on an SDS 100. So everything, he's got one simulcast tower. So yeah, you will love the SDS 100 if you've got simulcast in your area. It works great for that. Another topic idea from Ray: how did we get into scanners or why? I think we've talked about that briefly, but we're running late, so we'll save it for another show. Let's see here. Lucia still's got a bunch of the police calls. 396T and XT. That's I think you were talking about the RH96s. They will work on that. Dale got a free copy of Monitor America. Yeah, you know what? I've got mine out there. I'm sure you did some of the states out west. I did 10 or 15 states for Monitor America at the time, and I got paid for that. But if you did one state or contributed some substantial stuff, they would send you a copy of the book. So it was a great thing. That the first Monitor America was about this thick. The second one was huge.
Yeah, I mean, it was a pretty thick books.
Yep. Great topic idea. What's the craziest thing we've heard on your scanner? Boy, I can tell you some stories.
Yeah, me too. And we would have to probably put the viewer's discretion as recommended with some of the stories that I have.
Yeah, some of them will not be child safe. So
yeah, the
Ltr Little Tiger VHF converter. Oh yeah, I remember that. This was a little converter you put on your AM or FM radio, forget which, and would actually convert scanner frequencies to the broadcast band. And I don't remember what went onto AM or FM, but it was like a little converter. And there were a couple different models that had that, but that was one of the more popular ones. Ed had a 8-channel Midland. That was another brand, a CB brand that branched into scanners. John uses a Kenwood TK705D that he uses for rail fanning. I think that's a NXDN two-way radio.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Yep. Chris loves his Pro 164. That's a little more current. Let's see, a good show. The MR8100. That was one I probably should have included. That was a kind of a groundbreaking scanner. That was it was actually made to order for California Highway Patrol or LA Sheriff, I forget which, and then sold to the public as well. It had a great big, huge fluorescent display that you could view from the next county, and great big buttons, big loudspeaker, and it was very easy to use in a squad car. Let's see here. Chris also got a Pro 96. A lot of those still out there. They're very popular in this day. There was a scanner, I'm assuming was a Swedish brand, the DLS 80. Could scan all the Swedish police, fire, and EMS channels in just 2 seconds. That's quick. Lincoln's been scanning San Diego since 1971. That's about the time I started, a little bit after that. The SDS 200 is the hottest scanner out there. We have a training session how to create and manage favorites lists. I think we've done that a couple times, but that's another good future show topic, creating favorites lists.
Yeah, I can definitely do that. And we do have a couple of videos on the Scanner Master YouTube channel that you can check out. I go through step by step on how to create a favorites list, updating the database, and so on. So definitely check that out on the Scanner Master YouTube channel, and definitely, if you haven't already, subscribe to their channel as well.
Yeah. Well, the neat thing about that is there's 6 radios that you can learn how to do that, and it'll work almost exactly the same on all 6 of them. The SDS 100 and 200, the 436 and 536, and then the Home Patrol 1 and 2. The programming on those are remarkably similar for making and creating favorites lists, especially with the computer, that once you learn one, you know how to do all 6 of them. So let's see here. Ron, his 175 XLT was his first scanner. That was a basic 16-channel desktop scanner. And then he had the 70 XLT, which was the handheld scanner. Great scanner, except the battery packs. Those had proprietary battery packs. It was like 2 or 3 NiCad cells wrapped up in shrink wrap with a little thermistor and a connector that plugged into the radio. So and we used to sell the replacement batteries for those. It was like the BP 100 and the BP 120, but they are no longer available, at least new. So if you've got one of those old scanners with those proprietary NiCad battery packs, if you go to Batteries Plus, they can take the initial battery pack and they'll send it out to get rebuilt and then send it back to you. That's really about the only way you're going to get those batteries renewed, is to basically rebuild your existing one. Dale says the original Regency MX series programmable scanners had problems with the keypad. Yeah, they were kind of problematic at the time. Those keypads would go bad, and they were a matrix, so you would lose like 3 buttons in a row. The Bearcat 210 had rolling zeros. That was a neat feature. People loved that, where instead of having a light going back and forth, the zeros would light up on the scanner and going back and forth, so you can get the indication of where it was scanning. The funny thing about it is where that 0 was on the display had absolutely nothing to do with what channel was becoming active, it was just there as a visual indicator that the radio was scanning, and then it would stop on a channel. At least with the one with the LED and the regular light bulbs, it was actually physically checking those channels when that light was active. So let's see here. I talk too much, keep my hands down. Well, all right. The reason my hands are always up when I'm talking is that I know sign language, and I use sign language all the time, and I'm used to having my hands moving when I'm talking. Otherwise, my wife is deaf, and she would never understand what I'm saying. So that's why my hands are always moving. Sorry, Steve, but I can't break that habit. John's got an ICOM R100. Thank you, John. I was trying to remember that model number. They had the R100 and I think the R1000, and I think one of them came with a optional keypad. So those were the computer-controlled scanners, like the original SDRs. Let's see here. Dave has two 996 XTs, P2, and a 396 XT, and a 125. So he's a collector like we are. The 125 is my favorite rail fanning radio these days. Hated Hacker asks, how many scanners do I own? Oh, boy, I don't know. I ran out of fingers and toes. So I'm figuring the 50 or 60 range right now.
I have no clue how many I have. I mean, some of the ones that I have are still boxed up. I mean, I still have a 780 XLT, which I no longer use all the time. I have several portables that I don't use all the time. I have a whole array of portables over here. I mean, there's very good question. I'm not certain.
Well, I got to be at least 50 or 60. I mean, I've got 28 in the case right behind me. And
I got to be somewhere
5 over here.
I got to be somewhere right around with you. Maybe a little less. Probably right around. I'm not gonna. That's a good question. Too many, probably. Yes.
Too many scanners are not enough. Nobody told me that there's.
I've heard that before.
Oh yeah. I got to tell my wife when a new scanner comes in that I traded it with somebody or the numbers keep on going. But she says that there's more and more of them all the time.
No. I just taken this one out.
Yeah. Let's see here. Dale says, nobody told me there was going to be frequency split math. Yeah, when we're talking about splitting the frequencies, I had to kind of start doing that ciphering up in my head. And as I'm getting older, I can't do that kind of math in my head anymore. Joe says no audio issues tonight. So apparently the new setup is taking care of our audio issues. That's great.
Yeah, I mean, I'm liking this new setup. It seems to be working really well.
Yeah. Let's see here. Ron got ARC XT last week. He noticed that it's very slow. So he's got a lot of 7,000 memory channels. Holy cow.
Well, that could be why it's a little slow. There's a lot of data hitting the radio.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a lot of stuff. So he said, I know, 3 minutes. So he said one other scanner program is using 3 minutes and was one doing 40. You might want to check your COM port settings because I've never seen it take that long.
No, I haven't either.
Yeah, so there's probably some check your COM settings in both the software and in your device manager. So Dave obviously is a collector. He's got the older Regencies, the TMR LHU. The TMR was the scanner lines, the old Regencies with the number 47 light bulbs with the red covers on them. A couple of Ltras and a Bearcat 50 XLT. Let's see here. The railroad frequencies were split and resplit and subdivided. Yeah, they did the same thing. Originally, the railroad frequencies were like 161.07 and then 161.31 and 161.19, and then they split them to 30 kilohertz and then 15. There's actually some operations on the 7.5 kilohertz splits, not very many, but there's a few of them. But I don't think you're going to see much use of that until they actually do go to NXDN, which is well down the road. Let's see here. Alicia used to help customers at Radio Shack. Yeah, that's another piece of a lot of times the local Radio Shack guys would know the guys that know what they're doing. And if a question came up that they didn't know the answer to, they could point to, oh yeah, but you know what? I don't, but he knows. We should Scanner Master Polo t-shirts. Yeah. I've suggested that to Rich a couple times. It'd be great for Dayton,
It'd be great for the broadcast as well.
And for the broadcast, yeah. But he won't spring for it, and I'm not about to pay for him. By the way, my shirt is from this way. I'm always pointing the wrong direction. This is from the School of Police Staff and Command, class number 294. So if you ever got promoted in the police department, you either went to Staff and Command or the Southern Police Institute down in Louisville. I've been down there for classes, but this is the one where I went to the long course for.
Yeah,
What shirt you wear?
I've got the Boston Red Sox shirt on.
Minor league team, yeah.
Minor league team. If we have anybody out there that likes to do designing with software, the scanner guys, come up with some sort of a cool logo. I mean, we could see about trying to do something with that.
I can see if I can juggle here. Obviously, I can't.
It's gonna end up on the blooper reel.
Yeah. If we get somebody to design a shirt.
Yeah, I mean, that would
with
be
the Radio Club. We had Karma shirts, which I've worn on the show a couple times.
Yeah, I mean, I'm surprised, really, Rich would shoot that down. Especially we're live every week. You would think he would want us in shirts that were just blasting Scanner Master all over.
Yeah, that'd be great. And plus, when we're dating, we can wear them there too. Because you see all the other stores all have their logo T-shirts and stuff.
Yeah.
So, let's see
all
here.
Marketing.
Yeah, marketing. There you go. Cell phones are not digital. Yes, they are. That's why you can't hear them anymore, which is probably a good thing. Dave's got a great suggestion. Buy her something more expensive than your scanner. So I did just that. When I wanted a new computer and got her a new sewing machine, which costs a lot more than my computer.
I know about that sewing machine. And you didn't even, from what I understand, you didn't even get her the top of one, which was, when you told me that, I almost fell out of my chair how much it was.
Yeah. So the sewing machine she got is quite a bit more expensive than all of my computers on my desk. And
how you playing that well?
Yeah. So it's and so she can't complain.
Yeah.
And she doesn't. So she's a keeper. All righty. Let's see here. Okay. We're talking about the Home Patrol 1 display. So you press the menu button, you go to display options and font size. Well, hey, we learned something.
Yeah.
All righty. Thanks, Joe. We should have Joe come on the show one of these days.
Yeah, definitely. Joe should definitely join us. We can do one of these 3 wide. We could, from what I've learned today with our new system, we could have a 10 panel, 10 people on a panel. I think that would get a little too crazy. You and I talk so much, and nobody would get in a word edgewise.
Well, I've met Joe a few times, and he's nowhere near as wide as we are, so we could squeeze him in the middle. Monitor America. Yep, that was the nationwide book that we worked on. And we've done a show about prepping for a trip. Yeah, we did a road trip show.
Not too long ago. I think a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, it was in the springtime. Getting ready for spring road trips. Of course, nobody's going on road trips this year, but
we'll definitely have to do a new one. We did a show about road foods. Which was cool.
Yeah, boy, it wouldn't be nice to go out to a restaurant. Any restaurant.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I really think things is, unfortunately, our audience level is going to go up considerably with things starting to probably go the other direction with this.
Yeah, it's not getting any better.
Yeah.
The MR8100s were for the CHP. Thanks, Dale. Appreciate that. And the Radio Communications Monitoring Association, RCMA. I was remember number IL370, and in fact, the guy who started it, Captain Maudlin, Bill Maudlin, called. I talked to him about a year or so ago. I called in to the Scanner Master line looking for a scanner. I talked to him for quite a while. I'd met him a few times back in the day, but he was the first guy from RCMA. He started out in California. Let's see here. Yeah, we should check out your how-to videos. Absolutely.
Yeah, there's
He does a
tons
good
of them
job.
on the Scanner Master website.
Yep.
Not on the
Yeah.
website, but on the YouTube channel.
Yeah, Scanner Master YouTube. Let's see here. Great show tonight, starting July with a bang. Yep, we gotta get the fireworks going. This is the time of the year for it. Let's see. Dave says, "Don't break the habit of signing." Yeah, well, like I say, with my wife, I gotta do it. So, and I'm not even Italian, and I still talk with my hands.
Yeah.
So John has got a PCR 100. That was the communications receiver. That was that did HF as well. You can it was the R100 had a keyboard and display. The PCR 100 needed a computer. So the PCR was a black box, and the R100 you had a display. You could use either with a computer or with a with the display. Yeah. If I stop signing, I break that habit. My wife thinks I'm not talking to her anymore.
Yeah, that wouldn't be good at all.
Yeah. Oh, she might appreciate it, you know. Let's see here. Back in the 60s and 70s, you had to pull teeth to find out what frequency an agency on. You didn't have radio reference back then. Usually you can find them in police call, but a lot of times they would put crystals in their radios and not bother getting a license for them. And then it was a matter of trying to find them.
Yeah.
And that was hard because you didn't have, with crystal scanners, you had no way of searching. And with a tunable, you could find that they were there someplace, but you didn't know exactly where.
Yeah, or if they change frequencies, after the publication. Ooh.
Yeah. Yeah, and then you had to wait another year for the next book to come out.
And we're now spoiled rotten with radio reference.
Absolutely. So Vern has got a collection with a Pro 92, a 94, a 250, a WS 1040, and a 325. So he's got kind of a mix of older radios and some of the more current new ones. So that's a great thing. And let's see here. We're sponsored by Scanner Master, so we both need to work on the logo. Yeah, maybe we get a Scanner Master sponsored by, or Scanner Guys sponsored by Scanner Master t-shirts.
Yeah. Well, that Rich would have to pay for the shirts.
Yeah, but but look at this. I got two Daves that said they'll buy them. We can make them and sell them.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be a good thing. I mean, I got a Untitled shirt,
The thing about it is, if we did come up with a shirt and we were both in Dayton next year, we could give $10 off everybody that's wearing the shirt.
Hey, there you go. Well, knowing people in the scanner hobby, we'd have to start with the 2XL and go up to about the 5XL.
Yeah. We could have some sort of gimmick with the shirts if you wear them in Dayton.
Yeah, start selling the shirts, and then you get and everybody with a Scanner Master shirt gets $10 off a scanner. That would be great. Yeah. Let's see here. John has a DV10. So the DV10 from AOR is kind of a snake bit radio. The DV1 came out 3-4 years ago, and that was their desktop all mode digital receiver. And it actually worked pretty well. I had one here for a little while, testing it, and when we used to sell them, and it was a lot of fun to play with. But I wouldn't spend $1,000 on it myself. But there are people out there that would if you needed to have all those digital modes. It didn't do trunking, so it was a little bit limited for what I needed. But the DV10 is the handheld version. It came out about a year or so ago, and I've never had one, so I can't tell you for sure. But I've heard. And I've read a lot of the issues on it with apparently it drifts quite a bit. So there's some ongoing issues. So I don't know it for sure, but there are people who have said that. So let's see here. So John wants a 2XL, so he's about my size.
Yeah.
And Jim wants to meet the owner. So we should get Rich on here.
Yeah, I'll have to get Rich on here at some point. I don't think he would stay on the whole 2 hours. It'll be like an in and out thing. I mean, we're actually Do you see the clock on the top here? How long we've been live? We've broken the record right now.
Yeah, we are. This is the longest show that we've ever hit.
I mean, we only bill, for when we're live for 2 hours, so we're now in overtime.
Yeah, and we're not getting paid for it. So
we're gonna have to do one of these GoFundMe's or what is it called?
Yeah.
Patreon or Patreon.
Patreon, yeah. Patreon. We're doing this part for free, guys. So, all right. So Bob's got an R7000, a 996 XT, and an SDR play, and a couple other SDRs. John apparently has a DV10 with no drift, so maybe they've got that fixed.
Yeah,
I hope so, because it's a great concept. But like I said, they've gotten some bad press for some of that. So, and let's see here. Dave needs a 3X size, so he's a man of size. And Joe is saying be safe. Great message there, Joe. If you're going to be playing with fireworks, do it safely. Where I live right now, it's fire season, so that's our biggest worry with people with fireworks is starting wildland fires. And I was able to see 2 or 3 days ago, I went out my yard, I could see a fire in that direction and another one in that direction, the smoke. So, and people get hurt with fireworks. So if you don't know what you're doing, let the professionals do it. Be safe and be careful. When I was on the fire department, I went to many calls of people that were injured with fireworks. So please be careful. And let's see here. Reverse the crystals. Well, with the scanner crystals, there was a great myth out there that if you took the crystal and put it in one way, it would work with one frequency, and then you reverse it and put it in the other way, it would work on a different frequency. No, it didn't matter which way you had it plugged in. But if you had Regency and Bearcat scanners, you could swap the crystals and get slightly different frequencies. I think we mentioned that a little bit earlier. And if you were lucky and they used the frequency or something close to it on the other one, you could do that. But I think I only had like 1 or 2 channels where I could actually use the crystals in the other scanner and make a usable frequency out of it.
Looks like Dale's got a new favorite show. He's been mentioned several times, even on the screen.
Mentioned several times. Well, it isn't a Scanner Guy show without a mention of Dale and Joe.
Dale and Joe here. I mean, I feel like it's at this point we probably should see if Dale would want to go on with us.
Do they? I guess they do have the internet up there in Montana. So he's probably got dial up. He's watching, yeah. So maybe he's got something better than dial-up. So, we should do a shirt design and do a Kickstarter or GoFundMe.
Oh my word!
Yeah.
Yes. Probably the shirts will be such a huge hit. Rich, the owner, will want to buy one. I say, sorry, you're gonna have to pay for it. Pay your own shirt.
Yeah. Make him pay double. The reverse fluffy discount.
Unfortunately, no fluffy prices here. We're going to give you the price.
That's right. Well, and then knowing people in the scanner hobby, we should probably charge more for the smaller sizes than the larger sizes because we're not going to sell that many.
Oh yeah, and then we have to have as new scanner. When new scanners come out, we always do a pre-sale. We should do a pre-sale too.
Yeah, pre-sale on the Scanner Guys t-shirts. So, I think that. Yeah, good.
The other thing too, we'll have a pre-sale, and then we'll get in half the order, and then we'll have to wait for the rest of it.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah, that would be just our luck, And then, then we get you guys. Okay, who do we like the best that gets their shirts?
First come, first serve, as the old statement says.
Well, we're closing in on 3 hours. I think we're starting a little punch drunk here.
Yeah.
Let's see here. A couple more comments before we call it a night. We use barbed wire. Yeah. Let's see. So some police agencies are turning encryption off on some of their channels. Not all, but yeah. I think with all the disruption, the civil unrest and stuff, for transparency cases, you might see some agencies turning off the encryption that they've been using to keep things transparent. But I think you'll see a lot more agencies going to encryption because of the stuff that's going on, especially like what happened in Chicago, where they were messing around on their old antiquated radio system. So I think you're going to see a lot more agencies go to encryption, and you'll see a few come off encryption.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah, we can use the T-shirt sales to fund Dayton. Yeah. If we sell enough T-shirts, that'll pay for our trip to Dayton.
Yeah, if we sell enough T-shirts, we can have our own booth.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the Scanner Guy's booth next to the Scanner Master. So. Oh yeah, we can beta test the shirts. There you go. Yeah. And wait for the supply chain to improve and then do polo shirts. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh yeah.
And with the Arcom R30, I haven't played with the Arcom R30, and I don't know much about it.
Is that a newer radio from them?
Yeah, it's like a handheld version of the 8600. From what I understand, I think it'll do NXDN, which is IDAS, is what they call it on ICOM, and it might even do D-Star. I'm not sure, but it's kind of like a handheld tunable receiver that happens to scan. It's not really a scanner. It doesn't do trunking. It'll do P25, but it won't do trunking. So it's kind of limited usefulness for most of the scanner people, but it's a neat radio. But it's too expensive to be, that would be a toy for somebody like me. It'd be too expensive for me. My wife would kill me if I bought one of those. Well,
if anybody from ICOM is watching this broadcast right now, we'll happy take one of each, and we'll talk about it during a show.
Absolutely. We'll spend an entire show talking about it if you want to send it. So
yeah, definitely. If we'll take one of each, and we'll be happy as pigs in mud.
Yeah, that's right. We'll do the AOR as well. So we're equal opportunity beggars here.
Yes.
Mark asked if he could receive encrypted channels with software. No, unfortunately, Mark, there's no way to receive encryption. If they're encrypted, you're not going to hear them with anything. So you can hear it, but you're just not going to be able to understand it.
Yeah.
So even with an SDR, it's not going to help you. So, the 3-hour tour. We're the 3-hour show, the 3-hour tour. Do you remember what the 3-hour tour was?
Yeah, Gilligan's Island looks like.
So the big question with Gilligan's Island, Ginger or Marianne? That was always the question with Gilligan's Island. And I'm a Marianne guy, so. Yeah. Or maybe the professor. But yeah, so yeah, we should charge the smaller size triple the price of the big sizes because we're not going to sell as many of the little ones. So
yeah.
So I think that's the end of Romper Room here, buddy.
Yeah, so let's go through some of our slides here. Just reminding you of the things that are going on. If you've got any scanner questions, certainly email us at support@scannermaster.com. That's 1-800-722-6637 if you want to call over the phone. We're open Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern Time. We're open online 24/7 at scannermaster.com for your shopping needs. Mm-hmm. And you also want to make sure that you sign up for the Scanner Master newsletter. You can do that through their website, scannermaster.com. And next week's show, as a reminder, we will be live again on Facebook, more than likely, but definitely on YouTube, Wednesday, July the 8th, Scanner Hacks. So we're going to talk about all types of different things that you can use with your scanner. And you'll watch us 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. Pacific, and more than likely we'll be on for 2 hours. I don't know if we'll do another 3-hour tour, but you never know. And make sure you send your stupid scanner tricks and shack photos. We could feature that in an upcoming broadcast right here. Email those at thescannerguys@gmail.com. We'd love to see those as well. And if you're a rail fan, make sure you check out my blog, Train Aficionado. I have social media as well on Facebook and Instagram at Train Aficionado, and then Rail Aficionado on Twitter. So definitely check that out, as well as my website, trainaficionado.com. And as always, follow, like, and subscribe to Scanner Master on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. And make sure you follow and like and subscribe to the Scanner Guys on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram. We're on all the major social media right now. And if you're watching this broadcast right now on the Scanner Guys YouTube channel, subscribe to our channel. Make sure you do that right now so you won't miss a beat there. So if you made it,
tell them how to do the replay too.
Oh yeah, you can watch you can watch all of our shows on YouTube. So if you want to catch up on any of our old shows, you can watch them all on YouTube as well. There's all of our videos. This one, since it's 3 hours, may take a little bit longer for it to upload, but it will be there more than likely tomorrow. I can't believe we're at 3 hours.
Yeah, I know, and we're still getting comment. We could go all night with the comments and everything, and with the classic scanners. I mean, there are so many that we never mentioned. Fox, that's popped up in here, and that was another one. They had some very innovative scanners, but we could, like I said, we could talk about this all night. We almost have.
I mean, there is certainly demand for Scanner Guys t-shirts. So that's definitely an interesting thing. We'll definitely look at possibly doing something with that. I'll definitely dig into that. We can try to come up with something for that as well. But yeah, this has been a really exciting broadcast. We're using new technology, and it seems like it's working really well. So I'm excited. I was really excited to do the show tonight. And if you made it through the 2 hours and 51 minutes of this broadcast, congratulations for sticking with us. And do you have anything else for us, Rich?
No, I think I'm about talked out.
All right. So what we'll do is we will wrap it up for this evening. I'm Jonathan Higgins.
And I'm swallowing.
I'm sorry I didn't time that right.
Your timing was great. I'm Rich Carlson.
And we're the Scanner Guys. We'll talk to you again next week.
I guess.
Bye-bye.